I need to confess something before I tell you how my parents lost their mansion, how my sister's fake pregnancy got exposed in front of half the city, and how my brother in law was arrested at a charity gala. For 10 years, I let my family believe I was broke, not because I was ashamed, not because I was hiding from failure. I let them believe it because I knew the second they found out I had money, they would try to take it. My name is Vivian Mercer, and for most of my adult life, my family described me with 3 words: broke, bitter, dropout. My father said them like a diagnosis. My mother said them like a tragedy. My sister said them like a punchline. To them, I was the oldest daughter who had been handed a perfect future and thrown it away. I had left medical school in my second year, and in the Mercer family, that was not a personal decision. It was a public humiliation. My father, Graham Mercer, had spent my entire childhood planning my life as if I were an investment portfolio he intended to show off at dinner parties. He wanted a doctor in the family. Not because he cared about medicine, not because he cared about sick people. He wanted the title. He wanted to stand at country club lunches and say, "My daughter, the surgeon," with that slow, satisfied smile men like him wear when their children become trophies. My mother, Elaine, wanted something softer, but just as cruel. She wanted a daughter she could polish, a daughter who wore the right dresses, smiled at the right people, and never made dinner awkward by having opinions. She used to tell me, "Vivian, life is easier when you learn how to be pleasant." What she meant was obedient. What she meant was quiet. What she meant was Madison. Madison was my younger sister, and from the moment she learned how to cry on command, she became the sun in our house. She was pretty in a way people immediately rewarded. Big eyes, soft voice, perfect timing. If Madison broke something, she looked frightened and said my name. If Madison lied, she cried before anyone questioned her. If Madison wanted something, my parents called it a need. If I needed something, they called it attitude. I learned early that truth did not matter in our family. Performance did. When I brought home straight A's, my father asked why one grade was not higher. When Madison stumbled through a dance recital and forgot half the steps, my mother cried and bought her roses. When I won a regional science competition, Graham said, "That's nice, but don't let it make you arrogant." When Madison posted a blurry selfie in a department store dress, Elaine said, "You have such natural elegance, sweetheart." Sweetheart, that word still bothers me. My mother used it like a ribbon around a knife. Madison was sweetheart when she was praised. I was sweetheart when I was being corrected. Sweetheart, you always make things harder than they need to be. Sweetheart, you don't have to challenge everything. Sweetheart, maybe if you smiled more, people would want to help you. By the time I was 13, I understood my role. Madison was the daughter who made them feel successful. I was the daughter who made them feel judged. My father called me intense. My mother called me difficult. Madison called me jealous. The funny thing was, I was jealous, but not of her clothes or her attention or the way strangers complimented her. I was jealous of how easy love looked when it was pointed at her. I was jealous of the way my parents believed her without evidence. I was jealous that she could fail softly, while I had to succeed perfectly just to be tolerated. So I tried. God, I tried. I became exactly what my father said he wanted. I studied until my eyes burned. I volunteered at hospitals. I memorized anatomy charts while other girls were sneaking out to parties. I let Graham introduce me as future Dr. Mercer so many times that the title started to feel less like a dream and more like a collar. Everyone thought I was ambitious. I was not. I was starving. I wanted approval so badly that I mistook my father's expectations for love. Medical school should have been the moment my family finally became proud of me. Instead, it became the place where I realized I was disappearing. I was surrounded by brilliant people who wanted to heal, research, serve, discover. I respected them. I admired them. But every day, I sat in those lecture halls. I felt like I was wearing someone else's skin. What I loved was not medicine. It was systems, patterns, data, the hidden architecture behind chaos. While my classmates studied case histories, I stayed up late building financial security models on a secondhand laptop. I became obsessed with fraud detection, with the tiny irregularities that exposed massive lies. Numbers told the truth people tried to bury. Maybe that was why I loved them. During my second year, I built a prototype that could flag suspicious transaction patterns faster than the tools several small institutions were using at the time. I did not build it for fame. I built it because I could not stop thinking about it. For the first time in my life, work did not feel like a performance. It felt like breathing. When I told my parents I was leaving medical school, my father stared at me like I had slapped him in public. "You're tired," he said. "Take a week off." "I'm not tired," I said. "I'm unhappy." His face hardened. Happiness is what people talk about when they lack discipline. My mother pressed a hand to her pearls. She always did that when she wanted to look wounded. "Vivian, do you understand what this will look like?" That was her real question, not whether I was okay, not whether I had been suffering. What will people think? Madison, who had never finished anything more demanding than a juice cleanse, leaned against the kitchen island and smiled. Maybe she just couldn't handle it. My father looked at her, then back at me, and I saw the decision form in his eyes. He needed a version of the story that protected him, so he created one. Vivian could not handle pressure. Vivian ran away. Vivian threw away a future other people would have killed for. Vivian embarrassed the family. Within a month, that was the official history. At weddings, Elaine sighed and told relatives I was taking time to regroup. At dinner parties, Graham joked that not everyone was built for excellence. Madison told her friends I had dropped out to play with computers, as if technology were a child's hobby and not the foundation of the entire modern economy. I wish I could say I stopped caring immediately. I did not. There were nights I sat alone in my tiny apartment, eating instant noodles from the pot because I only owned 2 bowls, wondering if they were right. My mattress was on the floor. My desk was a folding table I found online for $20. I worked contract jobs during the day and built my software at night, sleeping beside my laptop like it was a campfire keeping me alive. My first pitch was rejected so quickly that one investor did not even finish his coffee. The second told me fraud detection was too crowded. The third asked if my husband had helped me with the technical side. I was not married then. I remember walking back to my car, sitting behind the wheel and laughing until I cried. But I kept going. Not because I was brave every day. Some days I was petty. Some days I imagined my father's face if I succeeded. Some days I wanted Madison to see my name somewhere she could not ignore it. But beneath all that anger was something cleaner. I knew I was good. I knew the system worked. I knew I had built something real, even if no one with power had admitted it yet. The first break came from a regional bank that had been losing money through what they thought were vendor errors. My tool flagged a pattern their internal team had missed for months. It uncovered a 7-figure irregularity hidden behind fake invoices and repeated micro-adjustments. The bank recovered enough money to make people pay attention. That was the beginning of Meridian Ledger. At first, Meridian was just me, a laptop, and a name that sounded more stable than I felt. Then came one analyst, then two engineers, then a seed round, then a contract with a banking network that changed everything. We built compliance tools, fraud detection systems, risk analysis platforms. We helped institutions find the lies buried inside their own ledgers before regulators found them first. By 34, I was the founder and CEO of a financial technology company valued at $240 million. My family knew none of it. To them, I was still the dropout, still the cautionary tale, still the woman who had married well because she could not build anything herself. They knew Julian had money. They knew he developed commercial real estate and wore suits that made men like Graham stand straighter. So they assumed I was being kept. They assumed my apartment had become a penthouse because Julian rescued me. They assumed any peace in my life had been purchased by a man. I let them. That sounds strange. I know. People ask why I did not correct them, why I did not send articles, interviews, company profiles, anything. The answer is ugly. Every time my family thought I had even a little money, they found a way to make Madison need it more. When I was 19 and working a summer job, Madison needed a new camera for her creative career. When I was 23 and barely paying rent, my mother hinted that Madison was depressed, and a spa weekend might help. When I received my first real bonus, Elaine somehow knew and called to say Madison had fallen behind on credit cards because she was building her brand. I gave in more times than I want to admit. Not because I loved Madison that much, because I still believed generosity might earn me a place at the table. It never did. So, when Meridian began to grow, I made a decision. I separated my public life from my family life with surgical precision. My legal team handled privacy. My assistant, Nora Bennett, understood the boundaries. My husband respected them. Julian never pushed me to reveal anything before I was ready. He simply watched, quietly furious, whenever my mother called and asked whether I was keeping busy these days. He once asked me, gently, "Does it hurt when they talk to you like that?" I told him, "Not anymore." That was a lie. It hurt every time. The only person in my family who had ever made the hurt smaller was my grandmother, Evelyn. She was Graham's mother, though I still do not understand how someone like her produced someone like him. Evelyn had soft white hair, sharp eyes, and a way of listening that made you feel like your words mattered before you even found them. When I told her I wanted to leave medical school, I expected disappointment. Instead, she made tea. We were sitting in her aspen cabin, snow pressing against the windows, the whole world quiet and blue. I remember twisting the mug in my hands and saying, "Everyone is going to think I failed." Evelyn looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Medicine was their dream for you, sweetheart, but your life has to belong to you." That was the first time the word sweetheart did not hurt. The cabin became sacred to me after that. It was not huge, not by Mercer standards. 3 bedrooms, old stone fireplace, pine floors that creaked in winter, a porch facing trees that looked silver after snow. To Madison, it was a luxury vacation asset, a place for photos, ski weekends, and pretending she liked nature as long as there was good lighting. To me, it was the last physical proof that someone in my family had once believed I deserved something beautiful without asking me to earn it. When Evelyn died, she left the cabin jointly to Madison and me. My father hated that. He thought Madison should have received it outright because she would use it properly. My mother said joint ownership would encourage closeness between sisters, which was hilarious because Elaine had spent our entire lives making sure closeness between us was impossible. I did not fight. I did not ask for more. I paid my half of maintenance quietly through an account my parents never saw. I visited only when no one else was there. Sometimes I would sit by the fireplace and feel for a few hours like I had not imagined being loved. That was why the cabin mattered. Not because of the market value, not because of the property, because when you grow up as the child, everyone edits out of the family story. You cling to any place where your existence was once welcomed. For 10 years, I built my life in silence while my family built a myth around my failure. They laughed at my clothes, my career, my supposed dependence on Julian. Graham called me a wasted investment. Elaine called me lost. Madison called me pathetic. And I let them. I used to think I was hiding my success because I was afraid of their judgment. The truth was worse. I was hiding it because I was afraid of their entitlement. I knew that if they discovered what I had built, they would not apologize. They would not ask how hard it had been. They would not say they were proud. They would calculate. They would measure my success against Madison's desires. They would turn my company into a family resource, my money into an obligation, my boundaries into betrayal. They would do what they had always done, take the best part of me and hand it to her. I thought silence would protect me. For a while it did. Then my mother called on a Thursday afternoon with sugar in her voice and poison underneath it. "Vivian," she said, soft and bright, "we miss you. Your father wants everyone together for dinner this weekend. Madison has important news." I closed my eyes. My mother only sounded affectionate when she wanted something. "Please don't make this difficult," she added. And there it was, the real invitation. I did not know yet that they had already prepared the legal documents. I did not know they planned to humiliate me across a dinner table, use Madison's fake pregnancy as a weapon, and demand that I sign away my share of Evelyn's cabin. I did not know Preston Vale, my arrogant brother-in-law, was already stealing millions from client trust accounts at Crestmont Private Bank. I did not know my parents' mansion was 5 months behind on mortgage payments. All I knew was that my family had remembered I existed. And somehow, after everything, a small, stupid part of me still hoped it meant they wanted me there. That was the last time I confused being summoned with being loved. The thing about my mother's voice was that it could change temperature without changing volume. Elaine Mercer never shouted when she wanted control. She softened. She sweetened. She made every sentence sound like a silk scarf sliding over a blade. "Vivian, sweetheart, we miss you," she said over the phone that Thursday afternoon. I was standing in the glass-walled conference room at Meridian Ledger, staring down at downtown Los Angeles while my executive team waited for me to return to a quarterly risk briefing. On the screen behind me were projections, regulatory updates, and a client expansion strategy worth more than my parents' entire neighborhood. But in that moment, one word from my mother still reached through 10 years of therapy and success and found the child in me who wanted to believe her. "Sweetheart, I hated that it still worked." "That's nice," I said carefully. "Is everything okay?" There was a tiny pause, not long enough for most people to notice, but I had been trained by Elaine Mercer my whole life. My mother never paused unless she was rearranging the truth. "Of course everything is okay," she said. "Your father just wants the family together this weekend. Madison has important news, and it would mean so much if you were there." Madison had important news every 6 weeks. A brand collaboration, a new wellness journey, a spiritual reset, a designer purchase she pretended was gifted, a dramatic illness that disappeared when no one offered enough sympathy. Still, my mother's tone told me this was different. "What kind of news?" Elaine gave a soft laugh. Now, Vivian, don't make me spoil your sister's moment. There it was, the reminder. Madison had moments, I had obligations. Behind the conference room door, Nora Bennett, my executive assistant, lifted her eyebrows through the glass. She had known me since Meridian Ledger was 3 people in a rented office above a dental clinic. She knew the difference between my professional stillness and my family stillness. Professional stillness meant I was thinking. Family stillness meant I was bleeding quietly. I have a full schedule, I said. It's one dinner, my mother replied, a little colder now. Your father has been under stress. Madison needs support. Please don't make this difficult. Please don't make this difficult. The family motto, if we had ever been honest enough to have one. I almost said no. The word was right there, clean and possible. But my mother had chosen her bait well. Family dinner, important news, father under stress, Madison needing support. She knew exactly which old doors to knock on inside me. So I said, fine, Saturday. Her warmth returned instantly, which told me it had never been real. Wonderful, 7 o'clock. And Vivian? Yes. Try to come with a good attitude. I looked at my reflection in the conference room window. 34 years old, CEO, founder, wife, employer, woman who had negotiated with bank presidents, regulators, venture partners, and men twice my age who thought confidence was something only they were allowed to own. And somehow my mother could still make me feel like a teenager being warned not to embarrass the family. I'll see you Saturday, I said, and ended the call. When I walked back into the meeting, Nora did not ask questions. She only slid a fresh coffee toward me and whispered, "Family?" I nodded. Her mouth tightened. "Do you need me to move anything?" "No," I said. "I need you to remind me not to believe them." Nora looked at me for a long second, then said, "That I can do." On Saturday evening, I drove myself to my parents' Calabasas mansion. Julian offered to come with me, but I told him no. It was not because I did not want him there. I did. Julian had a way of making rooms remember their manners. But my family behaved differently around him. They became polished, cautious, impressed despite themselves. I knew if he came, they would perform. I needed to know what they wanted when they thought I was alone. The Mercer house sat behind iron gates at the end of a curved driveway lined with olive trees. From a distance, it still looked magnificent. Creamstone exterior, arched windows, manicured hedges, soft lighting placed carefully enough to make the whole property appear warmer than it had ever felt inside. My mother loved houses that looked like magazine spreads. She believed beauty could cover rot if you spent enough on flowers. But I noticed details now that I might have missed years ago. One exterior tile near the fountain was cracked clean through. A section of landscape lighting flickered as I pulled in. The left garage door shuttered before closing, the motor whining like it needed repair. Near the front steps, a marble corner had chipped and been badly patched. None of it screamed disaster. That was not how financial decline worked in families like mine. It whispered first. A house did not collapse all at once. Neither did a lie. Elaine opened the front door before I rang. She was wearing ivory silk and pearls, her hair pinned into the kind of effortless shape that required 2 hours and professional help. She looked me up and down so quickly another person might have mistaken it for affection. "Oh, Vivian," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "You look comfortable." I almost laughed. My dress was simple, black, tailored, and worth more than the bracelet on her wrist, though she would never know that because it did not shout its price. Elaine trusted logos more than quality. Madison had inherited that. "Hello, Mother." She smiled in that tight way that meant I had already disappointed her. Everyone is in the dining room. The foyer smelled like white lilies and furniture polish. Crystal chandeliers poured light across the marble floor. Everything gleamed, everything echoed. That house had always felt less like a home than a place waiting to be photographed for people who did not know us well enough to hear what happened after the guests left. As we walked toward the dining room, I noticed more small fractures. A water stain near the hallway ceiling, carefully hidden by dim lighting. A missing piece of trim by the staircase. One of the sconces buzzed faintly. Elaine moved past it all with her chin lifted, pretending decay was invisible if she refused to acknowledge it. Graham was already seated at the head of the dining table when I entered, because of course he was. My father treated dinner like a board meeting where everyone else had already failed. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his navy jacket pressed, his expression arranged into disappointment before I had even spoken. Madison sat to his right, glowing with triumph. She wore a pale blue dress that looked expensive from across the room and cheap up close. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves over one shoulder, and her makeup had been done in that delicate, camera-ready style she used whenever she planned to cry publicly. Preston Vale sat beside her, one arm draped over the back of her chair, like she was an acquisition he had closed. Preston had the kind of confidence that came from being slightly important in rooms where no one truly powerful was present. He was a risk management director at Crestmont Private Bank, and he mentioned the title with the frequency of a man terrified people might forget it. He wore a watch too large for his wrist and a smile too small for his face. "Vivian," Graham said. "Not hello, not good to see you. Just my name, spoken like an item on an agenda." "Dad," Madison gave me a bright little wave. "You made it. We were worried you'd be too busy." The way she said busy made it clear she meant unemployed. "I found the time." Preston chuckled into his drink. "That must be nice." I looked at him. "It is." Elaine's eyes sharpened, but she kept smiling. "Let's sit before the food gets cold." The seating arrangement told me everything. Graham at the head, Elaine beside him, composed and observant, like a judge's wife. Madison and Preston together on one side, united in whatever performance had been rehearsed before I arrived. My seat was at the far end, opposite my father, physically separated from the rest of them by a long stretch of polished wood and old resentment. It was not a dinner table. It was a courtroom. For the first 15 minutes, they pretended. Elaine asked about my little projects. Graham talked about a charity board as if he had personally saved the underprivileged by attending quarterly lunches. Preston explained market volatility to me in a tone normally reserved for children and golden retrievers. Madison touched her stomach twice when she thought I was looking, then quickly moved her hand away as if saving the gesture for later. I saw it. Of course I saw it. I had spent my career studying anomalies. Madison Mercer was a walking irregularity. She refused wine when Elaine offered it, placing one hand over her glass with theatrical modesty. But 10 minutes later, when Preston distracted my parents with a story about some banking conference, Madison lifted his champagne flute and took a quick sip. She winced when she sat down, but not like someone nauseous or tired. It was sharper, lower, a guarded pain around her abdomen. Surgical, I thought, not pregnant. Then again, I had no proof. And in my family, proof had never mattered when Madison was performing. Finally, Elaine set down her fork and looked at Madison with shining eyes. "Darling, I think now is the perfect time." Madison lowered her gaze. Preston placed a hand over hers. Graham straightened. I felt the room inhale. Madison looked up, eyes already wet. Preston and I wanted to tell everyone together because family means everything to us. She paused, letting the words settle exactly where she wanted them. "We're having a baby." Elaine gasped as if she had not known. Graham's face transformed. The coldness melted into something almost tender. And for one strange second, I saw the father I had spent my childhood trying to reach. He stood, walked to Madison, and kissed the top of her head. "The future of this family," he said, voice thick. I sat at the far end of the table, watching him bless a lie with the love I had begged for in truth. My mother cried into a linen napkin. Preston accepted congratulations with solemn pride, like he had personally invented fatherhood. Madison placed both hands over her stomach and looked at me. "Well," she said softly, "aren't you going to say anything?" I could have asked how far along she was. I could have asked the doctor's name. I could have mentioned the champagne, the wince, the strange compression line visible for half a second beneath the fabric of her dress when she shifted. But I knew better than to challenge the family miracle before understanding why I had been invited to witness it. So I smiled politely. "Congratulations." Madison's eyes flickered. She had wanted more. Tears, maybe. Envy. A visible crack. Preston leaned back. "It changes everything, obviously. Priorities, family planning, assets." There it was. Assets. Graham returned to his seat. Elaine dabbed her eyes, then glanced at my father. A current passed between them. Practiced. Rehearsed. My stomach tightened before Graham even reached beneath his chair and lifted the leather folder. He placed it on the table beside his plate, rested one hand on top of it, and looked at me. "Vivian," he said, "this is a moment for maturity." I almost admired the efficiency. They had waited less than 3 minutes after the pregnancy announcement before putting a price on it. "What is that?" "A family matter," Graham said. "One that should have been resolved long ago." He opened the folder, removed a stack of legal documents, and slid them down the length of the table toward me. The paper stopped beside my untouched water glass. I did not need to read the first page twice. Relinquishment of ownership interest. Aspen property. Evelyn Mercer estate. My body went very still. Elaine leaned forward, voice soft. "Before you react, sweetheart, please understand this is not meant to hurt you." That was how I knew it was meant to hurt me. Madison lowered her eyes again, one hand on her stomach. "We just need stability right now. For the baby." Preston nodded. "The cabin is more practical for us. We'll be using it as a family property. Vivian, realistically, what are you going to do with it?" I looked down at Evelyn's address printed in black ink, reduced to a parcel number and legal description. Pine floors, stone fireplace, snow against windows. My grandmother's hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "Medicine was their dream for you, sweetheart. But your life has to belong to you." My throat tightened so quickly I had to press my tongue against the roof of my mouth to stay composed. Graham mistook my silence for weakness. He always had. "You don't have children, so," he said. "You don't have a traditional career. You certainly can't manage the upkeep long term. Madison and Preston are building a real future. It makes sense for the cabin to belong to the part of the family that will actually continue." The part of the family that will actually continue. There were sentences that did not sound violent until they landed. That one landed everywhere. Elaine reached across the table as if she might touch my hand, though she was too far away to do it. "No one is erasing you, Vivian. We're simply asking you to be reasonable." I laughed once, quietly, not because anything was funny, but because the alternative was making a sound I would regret. "You prepared legal documents before inviting me to dinner." Preston smiled with corporate patience. "That's just good planning." "Good planning," I repeated. He took that as encouragement. Men like Preston always did. Luxury properties are liabilities, he said, settling into the lecture he had clearly been waiting to deliver. Taxes, maintenance, insurance, seasonal upkeep, repairs. People without consistent income streams often underestimate the burden. Frankly, Vivian, your parents are trying to spare you from a financial responsibility that could become overwhelming. It took effort not to smile. Crestmont Private Bank had contacted Meridian Ledger twice in the past month through back channels. Their compliance division was panicking over irregularities they could not isolate. My team had already flagged suspicious vendor patterns inside one of their departments. I did not yet know Preston was connected, but I knew enough to find his confidence fascinating. He continued, enjoying himself. I work in risk management. I understand asset protection. Sometimes the smartest thing a person can do is admit they're out of their depth. Madison tilted her head at me, lips shining. Besides, it's not like you decorate it properly. You still dress like you're trying not to be noticed. Elaine murmured, Madison, but she did not really stop her. Madison smiled wider, encouraged. I'm just saying, the cabin has potential. It could be beautiful with the right taste. Elevated. She reached for her handbag on the chair beside her and placed it on the table like evidence of her qualifications. A glossy designer logo faced outward. She wanted me to see it. She wanted all of us to see it. I saw it. I saw the uneven stitching near the side seam, the printed brand stamp sitting too high, the hardware with the wrong weight and undertone, the lining that puckered at the edge because whoever made the fake had copied the outside from photos but guessed at the interior. Madison caught me looking. Do you like it? Preston surprised me. Limited edition. I should have let it go. Truly. There were larger issues on the table, but sometimes cruelty chooses the smallest door, and I was tired of being the only person expected not to walk through. It's fake, I said. The room froze. Madison blinked. Excuse me? The bag, I said. It's fake. The stamp is wrong, the stitching count is off, the hardware is too light, and the lining is cheap. Whoever sold it to you did a decent job from a distance, but up close, it's obvious. Color rushed into Madison's face. Preston looked at the bag, then at his wife, then at me, irritation flashing behind his eyes. Elaine's lips parted. Graham's jaw tightened. Madison snatched the bag off the table. You're such a bitter little freak. There she is, I said softly. Graham slammed his hand down so hard the silverware jumped. That is enough. The old fear moved through me automatically. My father's anger had been the weather of my childhood. When Graham Mercer thundered, everyone adjusted. Elaine softened. Madison cried. I apologized. That was the system. But I was not 13 anymore. Graham pointed at the documents. You come into this house with your jealousy and your resentment, and you insult your sister on what should be one of the happiest nights of her life. You have contributed nothing to this family but embarrassment. Graham, Elaine whispered, though she did not mean stop. She meant not so loudly. No, he snapped. She needs to hear it. Madison understands family loyalty. Preston understands responsibility. They are preparing for a child, and you are sitting there clinging to a property you cannot afford because you cannot stand to see your sister happy. Madison looked down, pretending to cry. No tears fell. My father leaned forward. You do not deserve that cabin. Evelyn made a mistake. That one hurt. I wish it had not. I wish I could tell you that by then I was too powerful, too healed, too removed from their approval for the sentence to touch me. But grief does not care how successful you become. There are wounds money cannot close. My grandmother's name in his mouth felt like a hand around my throat. Still, I did not cry. Graham pushed a pen toward me. Sign the papers, humming. I looked at the pen. Elaine said, Vivian, please, don't turn this into a scene. Preston added, honestly, this is the cleanest solution for everyone. Madison sniffed. For once, just do the right thing. The right thing. I thought about Evelyn. I thought about being 13 in that cabin. Snow falling outside. Coco warming my hands while she told me my life belonged to me. I thought about every birthday my parents forgot to celebrate properly, every report card dismissed, every apology I had been forced to give for things Madison did. I thought about my first office, my folding table, my laptop glowing in the dark, while I built a future none of them believed I deserved. Then I picked up the pen. The room changed. I felt it. Elaine exhaled. Madison's mouth curved. Preston looked satisfied. Graham leaned back slightly, already victorious. For most of my life, my family had mistaken my silence for surrender. I uncapped the pen and looked down at the signature line. Vivian Mercer. My name waited there like a trap. For 1 second, the old instinct rose in me. Sign it, keep the peace, be reasonable, earn love by disappearing. Then something inside me went quiet, not numb, not cold, quiet. I capped the pen, placed it neatly on top of the documents, and slid the entire packet back toward my father. No, I said. No one moved. Madison stopped pretending to cry. Preston's smile vanished. Elaine stared at me as if I had spoken another language. Graham's face darkened slowly, disbelief hardening into rage. What did you say? I folded my hands in my lap so they would not see them tremble. I said no. The silence that followed was absolute. I thought refusing would feel like rebellion. It did not. It felt like breathing after being underwater for 34 years. Graham stood so abruptly his chair scraped against the marble floor. Then you are no longer welcome in this house. Elaine made a small, wounded sound, but she did not contradict him. Madison's eyes glittered. Preston looked at me with the smug pity of a man who thought he had just watched someone choose poverty out of pride. I stood slowly. For the first time that night, I smiled. Understood, I said. And that was the moment the dinner trap failed. For most of my life, when my father told me to leave, I begged to stay. Not always out loud. I had too much pride for that. But inside, I begged. I searched his face for a crack in the anger, some sign that he wanted me to fight for my place in the family. I used to believe being thrown out was a test. If I apologized fast enough, softened enough, shrank enough, maybe he would let me back in. That night, standing at the far end of my parents' dining room, with the unsigned cabin documents between us, I finally understood something. A home that requires you to disappear in order to enter is not a home. Graham Mercer stood beside his chair, one hand still pressed against the table, his face dark with the kind of rage rich men call authority. Elaine sat frozen beside him, eyes wide and wet, already preparing to tell herself that I had forced this. Madison held her fake designer bag against her lap like a shield. Preston watched me with cold amusement, as if he were witnessing a bad investment collapse in real time. You think this is strength? My father asked. I did not answer. He hated that. You think saying no makes you powerful? His voice rose, filling the room. You are a 34-year-old woman with no meaningful career, no children, no respect for family, and no understanding of sacrifice. I almost smiled at that last word. Sacrifice, in our family, had always meant giving Madison whatever she wanted and calling it Love. Elaine placed a trembling hand on his sleeve. Graham, please. But again, she did not mean stop hurting her. She meant stop making this look ugly. My father pulled his arm away. No, I am finished pretending her behavior is acceptable. He pointed toward the foyer. Get out! There it was. Simple. Final. The sentence he had trained me to fear. Madison's mouth curved before she remembered she was supposed to look fragile. She lowered her eyes quickly and touched her stomach. Dad, don't upset yourself. It's not good for the baby. The baby. The imaginary shield already doing its job. Preston leaned back in his chair and sighed. Vivian, this is what happens when emotion overrides reason. You had a chance to handle this like an adult. I turned my head slowly toward him. You should be careful giving speeches about reason. His expression flickered, just briefly, a tiny tightening around the mouth. It was the first honest thing I had seen from him all night. Graham slammed his palm down again. I said leave. Elaine stood now, one hand pressed against her chest. Vivian, I hope you understand what you're doing. You are tearing this family apart. That was another old trick. They could build the knife, sharpen it, place it in my hand, shove it toward my own ribs, and still call me violent for bleeding on the carpet. I understand, I said. My voice sounded strange to me, calm, almost gentle. I won't come back. For 1 second, something shifted in Elaine's face. Not remorse, not love, fear. She had expected drama, tears, a slammed door, a desperate apology. She had not expected acceptance. Manipulators know what to do with resistance. They know what to do with pain. They do not know what to do when the person they trained to chase them simply stops running. I picked up my purse from the chair. I did not touch the documents. I did not look at the cabin papers again. I walked toward the foyer, each step echoing against the marble like a verdict. Behind me, Madison made a soft sound. She'll come around. I stopped at the edge of the dining room and looked back. No, I said. I won't. Then I turned and kept walking. I had just reached the front door when headlights swept across the glass panels. A low engine rolled through the driveway, smooth and powerful. The sound too expensive to belong to anyone my parents had invited. The car stopped near the fountain. Through the window, I saw midnight blue paint under the outdoor lights. Julian's Bentley Continental GT. For the first time that night, I felt my breath loosen. I had not called him. I had not texted him. But Julian knew me well enough to know when silence meant I was handling something, and when silence meant he should be nearby. He did not rescue me. That is important. Julian had never treated me like a woman who needed saving. He simply showed up at the edge of battle, ready to drive me home when I was done. The front door opened before I touched the handle. My father had followed me into the foyer, probably to make sure I left with proper shame. Elaine hovered behind him. Madison and Preston came next, drawn by the sound of the engine. Julian stepped out of the car in a charcoal suit, tall, composed, and impossibly calm. The porch lights caught the clean line of his jaw, the silver of his watch, the quiet confidence of a man who had never needed to announce his value because other people did it for him the moment he entered a room. The effect on my family was immediate. Graham froze. Elaine's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the marble. She did not even look down. Madison's face changed so quickly it was almost satisfying. The smugness vanished first, then confusion, then calculation. Her eyes moved from Julian to the car to me, trying to force reality into a shape that still made her superior. Preston recognized the Bentley. Of course he did. Men like Preston tracked symbols of wealth the way hunters tracked footprints. His gaze dropped to the wheels, the trim, the license plate, then returned to Julian with a new and unpleasant caution. Julian walked toward me, ignoring everyone else until he reached my side. "Ready?" he asked. Not, "What happened?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Should I talk to them?" Ready, because he understood that this was my choice. I nodded. Yes. Madison recovered first, or tried to. She laughed too loudly and stepped onto the porch. "Oh my God, is this the performance now?" Julian looked at her as if noticing a sound, not a person. Madison folded her arms. "Vivian, seriously? A rented Bentley? That is so embarrassing." Elaine whispered, "Madison." But Madison was already moving, fueled by panic and envy. "No, Mom, come on. We're all supposed to believe this is her life now?" She gets kicked out, and suddenly some mysterious rich man appears in a luxury car. "What is he, Vivian? Your sponsor?" The word landed with the exact ugliness she intended. Old Vivian would have defended herself. Old Vivian would have explained that Julian was my husband, that he loved me, that I had my own money, that nothing about my life was fake. Old Vivian would have gathered proof like flowers and laid them at my family's feet, begging them to smell sincerity. I said nothing. Julian did not. He simply turned his eyes to Madison. "It's interesting," he said calmly, "how quickly your mind goes to fake money and fraud. People usually recognize the crimes they understand personally." Madison went pale. Not dramatically. Not enough for my parents to notice immediately. But I saw it, a flash of naked fear under the makeup. Preston stepped forward before Madison could answer. "I don't think we've been properly introduced." Julian's expression did not change. "Preston Vale," Preston said, extending his hand with forced confidence. "Risk Management Director at Crestmont Private Bank." Julian looked at his hand for half a second. He did not take it. "I know who you are." Preston's smile stiffened. "Is that right?" "Yes." The porch went quiet except for the fountain behind us and the faint buzz of the broken landscape light. My father's eyes moved between the two men, irritated that a conversation was happening outside his control. Preston dropped his hand slowly. Then, I take my reputation seriously." Julian's voice stayed even. "You should." Reputations become very fragile when liquidity concerns, missing trust funds, and pending compliance reviews start appearing in the same file. Preston's face drained of color. This time, everyone saw it. Graham frowned. "What is he talking about?" Preston cleared his throat. "Nothing. Industry gossip. People outside banking often misunderstand internal review procedures." That was almost impressive. The lie came instantly, smooth and practiced, but his right hand curled at his side. Julian took one step closer. Not threatening. He did not need to threaten. "Crestmont has been trying to bring in external compliance support for weeks. Regulators are asking questions. Several client trust accounts are showing irregular movement. If I were you, I would spend less time lecturing Vivian about asset management and more time making sure every invoice you approved can survive a subpoena." Madison looked at Preston. "Preston?" he snapped. "Stay out of this." The words came too fast, too sharp. Her mouth opened, offended, but she said nothing. My father turned to Julian. "Who exactly do you think you are, coming onto my property and making accusations?" Julian finally looked at him. Vivian's husband. Graham's jaw tightened. "I know that." "No," Julian said, "you don't. You know what you've chosen to assume. There's a difference." Elaine stepped forward, trying to recover the social script. "Julian, this has been a very emotional evening. Vivian is upset, and I am sure she has presented things in a way that— I know exactly what happened, Julian said. Elaine stopped. He did not raise his voice. That made it worse. My family understood shouting. They could respond to shouting. Julian's calm left them nowhere to hide. Madison's eyes narrowed at me. So what? You called him to come intimidate us? I didn't call him, I said. She scoffed. Right. He just magically knew. Julian glanced at me, and for the first time that night, warmth touched his face. I know my wife. My wife. The words should not have mattered. We had been married for years, but hearing him say it there in front of people who had spent my life making me feel like a guest in my own name steadied something deep inside me. Preston seemed to notice it too. His insecurity sharpened into cruelty. Your wife has a talent for dramatics, he said. We were having a private family discussion about a property she can't afford to maintain. Julian's gaze returned to him. That cabin? Yes, Preston said, encouraged by having a topic he thought he understood. A legacy asset. Sentimental, sure, but financially impractical for someone in Vivian's position. And what position is that? Preston gave a short laugh. Come on. No, Julian said. Say it. The command was quiet enough to be polite and cold enough to make Preston hesitate. Madison answered for him. Dependent. Elaine inhaled sharply, but she did not correct her. Madison lifted her chin. Everyone knows it. You don't have to make us feel guilty because Vivian married money. Something old and tired moved through me. Not pain this time, recognition. They needed me small. Even faced with evidence that contradicted the story, they would rather invent a humiliating explanation than question the version of me that made them comfortable. Julian looked at me. His eyes asked a question. Do you want me to tell them? I knew what he meant. He could have ended it right there. He could have said, Meridian Ledger, CEO, founder, $240 million. He could have watched their faces collapse under the weight of truth. For a second, I wanted that. I wanted my father to choke on every insult. I wanted my mother to replay every pitying smile. I wanted Madison to understand that the sister she mocked could have bought and sold her fantasy life 100 times over. I wanted Preston to realize the woman he lectured about risk had built the very company circling his fraud. But then, I looked at the legal papers still visible through the open dining room door. I looked at Madison's fake tears, Preston's shaking hand, Graham's anger, Elaine's wounded mask, and I realized the truth would be wasted on them if I gave it too early. They would deny it, spin it, demand from it, feed on it. No, not yet. I gave Julian the smallest shake of my head. He understood immediately. I turned to my family. Good night. Madison laughed again, but it cracked. That's it? You're just leaving? Yes. You're not even going to defend yourself? I looked at her for a long moment. The old me would have explained. The old me would have needed them to understand. That night, I realized silence was more powerful than proof. No, I said, I'm not. Then I walked to the Bentley with Julian beside me. Behind us, my family began talking all at once. Graham demanded answers. Elaine called my name in that trembling voice she used when she wanted to sound abandoned. Madison accused me of being dramatic. Preston told everyone to calm down while sounding the least calm of all. Julian opened the passenger door for me. I got in without looking back. As we pulled away from the mansion, I watched it recede in the side mirror. The chandeliers glowed through the windows, the fountain sparkled under the lights. From a distance, it still looked perfect, but I had seen the cracks. For several minutes, Neither of us spoke. Julian drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near mine but not touching it yet. He always waited. That was one of the ways he loved me. He did not grab for my pain just because he wanted to comfort it. Finally, I said, "They had papers ready." His jaw tightened. "For the cabin?" I nodded. "They used Madison's pregnancy announcement to ask me to sign away my half." "Is she pregnant?" I let out a humorless breath. "I don't think so." Julian glanced at me. "You noticed something." "I noticed several things, but not enough to say it yet." He nodded. No surprise. No accusation. Julian trusted my instincts because he had seen what they could do inside boardrooms and balance sheets. I pulled out my phone. "Vivian," he said carefully, "I'm not going to do anything illegal." "I know. I'm not going to invent anything." "I know that too." I found my CFO's number and called. He answered on the second ring despite the hour. "Vivian, start the full compliance review on Crestmont Private Bank," I said. My voice was steady now, almost too steady. "Flag every account Preston Vale has touched. Vendor approvals, client trust movements, shell entities, offshore routing, anything connected to his authorization chain." There was a pause. Then the professional alertness clicked into place. "Understood. Scope? Everything we can legally review under the emergency compliance request. If there's fraud, I want it documented cleanly and sent to regulators through the proper channels. Do you want this prioritized tonight?" "Yes." "Then we'll start tonight." I ended the call. Julian looked at the road ahead. "Are you sure?" I watched the city lights stretch in the distance, bright and indifferent. "No," I said honestly. "I'm not sure I'm okay." He reached for my hand then, gently, giving me every chance to pull away. I did not. "But I'm sure I'm done," I said. "I spent my whole life waiting for them to see me. Tonight I finally saw them." Julian squeezed my hand once. The Bentley moved through the darkness, away from the house where I had learned to beg for love, toward the life I had built while they were busy calling me nothing. That was the night they finally went too far. And without realizing it, that was the night they gave me permission to stop protecting them. The morning after my father threw me out, I woke up before sunrise in the penthouse Julian and I shared above downtown Los Angeles. For a few seconds, I lay still and waited for the familiar guilt to arrive. It always came after family fights, that heavy, trained feeling in my chest, the voice that sounded like my mother asking whether I had been too harsh, the memory of my father's disappointment pressing down like a hand on the back of my neck. Even when I knew they were wrong, some part of me still woke up searching for a way to make peace. But that morning, there was nothing. Not peace exactly. Not yet. But space. The bedroom was quiet. Beyond the glass wall, the city was turning silver under the first light. Julian was awake beside me, sitting against the headboard with his phone in one hand and a cup of coffee untouched on the nightstand. He did not speak when I opened my eyes. He only looked at me in that careful way he had, the way that asked permission before entering a wound. "What?" I asked. His jaw shifted. "Madison posted something." Of course she had. I sat up, already tired. "How bad?" He handed me the phone. The video had been posted at 6:17 in the morning. Madison knew timing. Early enough to catch the sympathetic crowd with coffee in hand. Late enough that she could pretend she had been awake all night crying. The thumbnail showed her sitting on her bathroom floor in an oversized cream sweater, hair messy in a way that had clearly taken effort, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, one hand resting over her stomach. The caption read, "I never thought I would have to speak publicly about family abuse, but my baby and I deserve safety." I pressed play. Madison looked into the camera with trembling lips. I don't even know how to say this, she whispered. Last night, my family experienced something really scary. Someone I love brought a dangerous man to my parents' home to intimidate us because we asked for fairness. I'm pregnant, and stress like this can be really dangerous for the baby. Julian went very still beside me. On screen, Madison wiped under one eye. No tear came away. She has always been unstable, Madison continued. I didn't want to say that publicly, but silence protects abusers. She has been financially threatening my family for years. We don't know what she's involved in, but we are scared. My parents are elderly. I am expecting. My husband's career is being attacked. We need legal protection. Then came the fundraiser link. Legal defense for a pregnant mother and her elderly parents. I stared at the screen until the video looped and started again. It was almost impressive, in the way a venomous snake is impressive. Madison had taken every truth, broken it into pieces, and rearranged it into a weapon. I had not threatened my parents financially, but soon I could. Julian was not dangerous, but he was powerful. Preston's career was not being attacked, but it was being investigated. Madison was not pregnant. At least I was increasingly sure she was not. But she understood that strangers forgave anything wrapped in motherhood, and she understood me. That was the cruelest part. The cruelest thing about being raised by manipulators is that they know the shape of your wounds. Madison knew exactly where to press. She knew I hated being called unstable because my family had used that word whenever I reacted to mistreatment. She knew I feared becoming the villain in other people's stories because I had spent my childhood being cast as one in my own house. She knew that if enough strangers believed her, a younger version of me would have rushed to defend myself until my voice broke. I handed the phone back to Julian. He said nothing. You want to say it? I murmured. I want to destroy her, he said calmly. Despite everything, I almost smiled. That is not helpful. I didn't say it was helpful. I said it was what I wanted. His honesty steadied me more than false comfort would have. My phone buzzed before I could answer. Nora. Then again. I answered. I know you've seen it, she said, without greeting. Please tell me you've seen it before I have to send it to you. I've seen it. Good. I've already pulled screenshots, timestamps, engagement data, the fundraiser page, comments where she repeats the claims, and 3 reposts from influencer accounts. Legal is waiting. I closed my eyes. Good morning to you too. Vivian, she accused you of abuse, financial coercion, criminal involvement, and endangering a pregnancy that may not exist. We can send a cease and desist within the hour. I also recommend a platform takedown request, preservation letter, and a public statement before this gets worse. I got out of bed and walked toward the window. The city looked clean from that height. Distance made everything seem manageable. No public statement. There was silence on the line. Then Nora said, I'm going to pretend the connection broke. No public statement, I repeated. Vivian. If we respond now, she gets to play victim. If we warn her, she deletes everything, changes her language, and hides behind stress. She is defaming you. Yes. She is raising money under false pretenses. Probably. She is blaming you for imaginary medical complications. I know. Nora exhaled sharply. Then why are we not stopping her? I looked at Julian. He was watching me now, understanding dawning in his eyes. Because if we let her keep talking, I said, she'll build our case for us. That was the moment I stopped reacting like a daughter and started thinking like myself. By 9 that morning, I was in Meridian Ledger's private legal conference room with Nora, our general counsel, 2 outside attorneys, and a digital forensics consultant. The city had fully woken behind the glass walls. People moved through the office with the quiet urgency that told me everyone knew something was happening, but no one was foolish enough to ask. The video played on the large screen once, then again without sound. My general counsel, Alina Park, sat at the head of the table with a yellow legal pad and the expression of a woman who billed by the hour but judged for free. "She's reckless," Alina said. "That helps us." "She's always been reckless," I replied. "It's just never cost her anything." "It will now." Nora pushed a folder toward me. "The fundraiser has already crossed $28,000. Something inside me tightened. $28,000 from strangers. For a lie. For a performance. For the same woman who once told my mother I was exaggerating when I said I could not afford groceries in my 20s. Alina tapped her pen. "We need clear boundaries. We do not hack accounts. We do not access private medical records. We do not contact medical providers under false pretenses. We do not do anything that muddies the evidence." "Agreed," I said. "We preserve public statements. We document financial trails lawfully available through existing compliance obligations. We use platform records through proper legal requests. We collect surveillance only where legally obtained. We rely on what she has chosen to put into the public record." "Good." "And regarding Preston Vale," Alina continued, "the Crestmont Review has already expanded?" I nodded. "My CFO started it last night under their emergency compliance request. We stay inside the contract scope unless counsel approves otherwise." Nora looked almost proud. "Preliminary flags came in at 4 this morning." I turned to her. She slid another document forward. "Vendor anomalies, repeated approvals tied to shell entities, trust account transfers that don't match client instructions. Nothing final yet, but enough to justify deeper review." Preston's face appeared in my mind. Smug, polished, lecturing me about risk while fraud moved under his own signature. "Keep it clean," I said. "Every step. I don't want revenge that can be challenged. I want truth that survives court." Alina nodded. "Then we wait." Waiting is not passive when you know what you are waiting for. By noon, Madison had posted 3 more times. One tearful update thanking supporters, one vague reference to medical stress, one photo of her hand on Preston's hand with the caption, "Protecting our little family." Each post added another layer. Each sentence created more exposure. My legal team preserved all of it. At 2:30, Elaine called me. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, then Graham, then Elaine again. I did not answer any of them. At 4:15, Nora walked into my office without knocking, which meant something had happened. "Your parents are at Julian's office." I looked up from the Crestmont preliminary summary. "Of course they are." Julian's commercial real estate firm occupied 3 floors in Century City, the kind of space my mother would describe as masculine and elegant because she thought those words belonged together. Graham and Elaine had not gone there because they wanted peace. They had gone there because they still believed Julian was the source of my life, my comfort, and whatever power they had glimpsed the night before. They thought if they could reach the man, they could control the wife. Julian called me 5 minutes later. "They're in reception," he said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Security is enjoying the change of pace." Despite myself, I laughed softly. "What do they want?" "You already know." "Yes, I did." He put me on speaker after asking first. I listened from my office as his assistant led my parents into a conference room. Elaine began with wounded dignity. "Julian, thank you for seeing us. We are very concerned about Vivian." Julian's voice was polite. "Are you?" "She has always struggled emotionally," Elaine said. "We've tried to support her, but last night was alarming. She refused a reasonable family request and then allowed you to intimidate us. Allowed. As if Julian were a dog I had failed to leash, Graham cut in. This has gone too far. Whatever influence you have over her, use it. She needs to sign the cabin documents and stop interfering with Preston's career. Julian said, Vivian is not interfering with Preston's career. Someone is, Graham snapped. Preston did that himself. Silence. Elaine recovered first. Julian, I know Vivian can be persuasive when she wants sympathy, but you should understand the family history. She resents Madison. She always has. Madison is pregnant now, vulnerable, and Vivian is behaving vindictively. Then my mother delivered the line that severed one of the last soft threads inside me. Julian, you married the wrong daughter. Madison understands how to support a powerful man. Vivian only knows how to resent one. I sat perfectly still at my desk. For a long second, there was no sound from Julian's conference room. When he spoke, his voice was colder than I had ever heard it. Do not ever speak about my wife that way again. Elaine gave a fragile laugh. I only meant. I know what you meant, Graham said. Now listen here. No, Julian interrupted. You listen. Vivian built more from nothing than your entire family ever built with every advantage handed to you. You mistake restraint for weakness because you have never had enough discipline to practice it. You mistake kindness for debt because every relationship in your life is transactional. And you mistake Madison's dependence for loyalty because it flatters you. I closed my eyes. Elaine whispered, That is incredibly disrespectful. What's disrespectful, Julian said, is walking into my office to ask me to control a woman you never bothered to know. Graham's voice lowered. You'll regret taking that tone with me. No, Julian said. I won't. But Preston may regret ignoring compliance notices, and you may regret assuming Vivian is the least powerful person in your family. My father said nothing. Julian continued. This meeting is over. My security team will escort you out. The call ended a minute later. I did not move for a while. Nora stood in the doorway. She had heard enough from my face. You okay? I opened my eyes. My mother just told my husband he married the wrong daughter. Nora's expression hardened. That woman is lucky I'm professional. She's lucky I am. While my parents were being escorted out of Julian's building, Preston Vale was receiving the email that would ruin his afternoon. The notice came from Crestmont's senior compliance office, copied to Meridian Ledger's external review team. His access to certain systems had been temporarily suspended pending a forensic audit. Vendor approval records, trust account activity, and internal communications related to several client portfolios were being preserved. Deletion permissions were restricted. Administrative overrides frozen. At first, according to the internal activity log we later received, Preston tried to open a vendor folder. Denied. Then a trust account archive. Denied. Then an invoice approval chain. Denied. Then he attempted to access a file deletion protocol he should not have needed unless he was trying to bury something. Denied. Every attempt was recorded. That was the beautiful thing about systems. People lied. Systems remembered. At the bottom of the notice was the executive authorization from Meridian Ledger. Vivian Mercer, Chief Executive Officer. Preston saw the name. He simply did not understand it. To him, V. Mercer was probably some older man in a corner office. The kind of faceless financial predator he feared and admired. It never occurred to him that the woman he had lectured across a dinner table, the woman he had called financially impractical, had her initials on the door closing around him. By evening, he went home early. Madison was in their living room, filming a luxury unboxing video. That detail came from the security footage later turned over during the investigation, but I can imagine it perfectly. Madison surrounded by tissue paper and boxes, ring light glowing, voice soft and bright for her followers, while her actual life caught fire behind the camera. She had spent $60,000 in 2 days. Designer shoes, bags, jewelry, skin treatments, a nursery mood board for a baby that did not exist. Much of it charged to an emergency card Preston had told her not to use. He walked in pale and sweating. Madison paused the recording. "You ruined my take." Preston asked, "What did you buy?" She rolled her eyes. "Content assets." "With what money?" "Our money." "There is no our money, Madison." That was when the mask cracked. They screamed for 40 minutes. Preston admitted there was no bonus coming, no liquidity cushion, no safe exit. The house was over-leveraged, the accounts were strained. The money funding Madison's lifestyle had come from places it should never have come from. Client funds, fake vendors, temporary transfers he thought he could replace before anyone noticed. Madison did not cry then. Real panic made her sharper, not softer. "You told me we were rich," she snapped. "I told you to slow down. You told me you could handle it. I stole because of you." She laughed at him. "No, you stole because you wanted people to think you were important. Don't blame me because you were stupid enough to get caught." That was my sister. Strip away the tears, the filters, the trembling captions, and there she was. Not fragile, not helpless, just hungry. By midnight, the fundraiser had passed $46,000. Madison posted another update thanking people for helping her protect her unborn child from a powerful woman trying to silence the truth. I sat alone in my office reading the words, "Powerful woman." For the first time in my life, Madison had accidentally described me correctly. Nora came in quietly and placed a fresh folder on my desk. "More from Crestmont," she said. I opened it. The pattern was no longer just suspicious. It was forming a map. Fake vendors, shell companies, client trust accounts, approval chains, names, dates, transfers. Preston's fingerprints were everywhere. Nora watched me read. "Do you want to stop Madison now?" I thought about my mother's voice, my father's rage, Madison's fake tears, Preston's lecture, the cabin documents waiting like a dare. "No," I said. Outside my window, Los Angeles glittered like a machine made of stars. Let them keep lying, because every lie had a ledger. And I was very, very good at reading ledgers. By Monday morning, my family's lies had become measurable. That was the strange comfort of my work. Pain was messy. Betrayal was personal. But money left trails. Debt had dates. Fraud had signatures. Desperation had patterns. And when people spent their lives pretending to be richer, kinder, and more powerful than they were, the numbers eventually told the truth. They had exhausted themselves trying to hide. Nora walked into my office at 8:15 with 2 coffees and a folder thick enough to ruin someone's week. "You're going to want caffeine first," she said. I looked up from the Crestmont Review. "That bad?" "That depends on whether you still believe your parents are financially stable." I stopped believing that when I saw the broken landscape lights. Nora placed 1 coffee beside me and sat across from my desk. Her expression was professional, but her eyes were careful. She had that look people get when they are about to hand you evidence of something you already suspected, but still are not prepared to see. "The Calabasas property is in default," she said. I did not speak. She opened the folder and slid the first page across my desk. My parents' mansion. The house of marble, chandeliers, imported flowers, charity luncheons, and moral superiority. The house my mother staged like a monument to good breeding. The house my father used as proof that he had won at life. 5 months delinquent. I stared at the figure. 5 months. Not one missed payment during a temporary cash flow problem. Not an accounting mistake. Not a misunderstanding. 5 months behind on the primary mortgage. Nora continued, voice even. They took out a second mortgage after Madison's wedding, then a third secured line tied to renovations and club dues. Club dues, I repeated. Yes, of course. My parents would rather go underwater than resign from a country club full of people who would not visit them in a hospital unless there was press. Nora tapped the page. They refinanced twice. The last refinance had terrible terms. Adjustable rate kicked in. Graham appears to have moved money between accounts to cover appearances, but the reserves are gone. Credit utilization is extremely high. Several cards are near maxed. What about liquid assets? Minimal? Retirement accounts? Damaged, borrowed against, from what we can see. I leaned back slowly. There are moments when truth arrives not like a slap, but like a door opening under your feet. My parents had spent years looking down on me while standing on a floor made of debt. They had mocked my clothes while borrowing against their house. They had called me financially irresponsible while paying country club dues with credit they did not have. They had tried to take Evelyn's cabin from me, not because Madison needed stability, but because they were running out of things to convert into cash. Nora looked at me gently. There's more. Of course there is. The lender is preparing to sell the distressed note at a discount. I understood immediately. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. A mortgage note is not just a bill, it is power. Whoever owns the debt controls the enforcement rights within the law. If a borrower defaults, the note holder can pursue remedies, foreclosure, settlement, restructuring, sale. Everything has procedures, timelines, notices, protections. It is not simple, and it is not instant. But it is leverage. My parents' lender wanted the problem off its books, and I had a company with an investment arm. Nora watched my face. Vivian, I know. You don't have to do anything with this. I know that too. This could get ugly. I almost laughed. Nora, ugly started before I was born. She did not smile. I stood and walked to the window. Downtown Los Angeles glittered under a hard blue sky. Somewhere across the city, my mother was probably still pretending her life was intact. My father was probably calling bankers who no longer returned quickly. Madison was probably filming herself in soft lighting, thanking strangers for money she did not deserve. Preston was probably watching the walls close in and telling himself there was still a way out. And Evelyn's cabin sat in Aspen, dragged into their greed like bait. I don't want the house, I said. I know. I don't want revenge that looks like theft. I know. I want every step legal. Then we make every step legal. Within an hour, my legal team was on the call. Alina Park led it with her usual surgical calm. Meridian Ledger's investment counsel reviewed the note sale terms. Outside foreclosure counsel explained the timeline. Compliance counsel confirmed conflict boundaries. I listened, asked questions, and took notes like I was handling any other distressed asset. Except this asset had a dining room where my father once told me I was an embarrassment. Can we purchase the note through the investment arm? I asked. Yes, counsel said. Properly documented, fair market distressed valuation, standard transfer process. Any issue with my personal connection to the borrowers? Not legally, provided there is no fraud, coercion, misrepresentation, or procedural abuse. We should over-document everything. Good. After purchase, you can send notice of transfer and default. They will have statutory rights. Timelines must be respected, no shortcuts. I don't want shortcuts. Alina studied me through the screen. Vivian, I need to say this clearly. Once Meridian owns the note, your parents may accuse you of targeting them. They will. We need to be prepared. They accuse me of abusing a fake pregnancy before breakfast. I'm not worried about accuracy. A few people on the call went very quiet. Alina's mouth twitched, but she kept professional control. Understood. The purchase took less time than I expected and more patience than I wanted. That is how legal revenge works. It does not have the satisfying speed people imagine. It is paperwork, verification, escrow, assignment documents, notices, recorded transfers, counsel reviewing, counsel. By Wednesday afternoon, Meridian Ledger's investment arm lawfully owned the defaulted mortgage note on Graham and Elaine Mercer's Calabasas mansion. I did not celebrate. Nora came into my office after the final confirmation and found me sitting in silence. It's done, she said. Yes. How do you feel? I looked at the signed assignment documents on my desk. Like I just became the creditor of people who once told me I would never understand money. Nora let out a slow breath. That's poetic. No, I said. It's accounting. The notice went out the next morning by certified mail and private courier. Alina insisted on redundancy. I agreed. No loopholes, no claims of improper service, no room for Graham Mercer to stand in a courtroom and pretend he had been blindsided by his own unpaid bills. The courier arrived at my parents' mansion at 10:42 a.m. I know the time because I watched the delivery confirmation appear on my screen. Graham signed for the envelope himself. The image from the courier's proof of service showed my father in a pale blue dress shirt and slacks, his face irritated, one hand gripping the envelope as if it had personally offended him. Behind him, through the open door, I could see part of the foyer, marble floor, white lilies, still pretending. The sender line read, Meridian Ledger Legal Department, Notice of Default and Intent to Foreclose. My phone rang 17 minutes later. Elaine. I watched her name flash across the screen until it stopped. Then Graham called. Then Elaine again. Then Madison texted. What did you do? I did not answer. By noon, Elaine tried a different strategy. She left a voicemail. Vivian, sweetheart, can we talk? Just the three of us. No drama. I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding. We're still family. We're still family. That sentence had been used to excuse everything. Cruelty, debt, silence, theft dressed as need, obedience dressed as loyalty. Family, in my mother's mouth, meant I owed them access no matter how they treated me. I hated that part of me still softened when she called me sweetheart. I hated it more because she knew. I played the voicemail twice. Not because I needed to hear it again, but because I wanted to study what it did to me. The first time, my chest tightened. The second time, something colder rose underneath. Nora stood near the door. Do you want me to coordinate through counsel? No, I said. I'll meet them. She frowned. Vivian. In public. Still. With my phone recording. Nora considered that, then nodded once. Beverly Hills Cafe, cameras, witnesses. I'll have security nearby but invisible. You sound like Julian. Good. He's sane. That made me smile despite myself. I chose a cafe in Beverly Hills my mother liked because the tables were far enough apart for privacy, but close enough that raised voices carried. It had valet parking, expensive salads, and wealthy women who wore diamonds before noon. Elaine would feel safe there. Graham would feel seen there. Both things mattered. Before I left my office, I turned on the recorder on my phone and tested it. Then I placed the phone face down on the table when I arrived, as if I were merely being polite. My parents came in 10 minutes late. That was intentional. Graham believed punctuality was something other people owed him. Elaine believed lateness made an entrance seem less desperate. But desperation is hard to hide when your hands shake around a designer handbag and your husband keeps checking his phone like money might appear if he stares long enough. They looked perfect from a distance. Graham in a gray jacket, Elaine in cream linen, pearls at her throat, sunglasses lifted into her hair. Up close, the strain showed. My father's skin looked sallow. My mother's makeup had settled into the fine lines around her mouth. Her smile was bright enough to hurt. "Vivian," she said, leaning in as if to kiss my cheek. I did not rise. She paused, then sat. Graham remained standing for half a second, offended by my lack of performance, then took the chair across from me. "We need to discuss what happened," he said. I folded my hands on the table. "Which part?" His eyes narrowed. "Do not be clever." Elaine touched his wrist. "Graham, we came to talk." No, they had come to extract. My mother turned to me with wet eyes. "Sweetheart, this has gone too far. Whatever anger you feel toward us, using Julian's connections to threaten our home is not the answer." There it was again. Julian's connections. Even with Meridian Ledger's name printed on the notice, they still could not imagine me as the source of power. They had built their image of me so thoroughly that reality had to knock more than once. "Julian has nothing to do with this," I said. Graham scoffed. "Don't insult me. I'm not." "Then explain how a company like Meridian Ledger suddenly owns my mortgage." I lifted an eyebrow. "So you read the notice?" His face reddened. "This is harassment." "No, it's a default notice." Elaine's voice trembled. "Vivian, your sister is pregnant. Preston is under unimaginable stress. Your father and I are dealing with temporary liquidity issues. This is when families should support each other." Temporary liquidity issues. My parents could be drowning and still use country club language for water. Graham leaned forward. "You will speak to Julian. We need a bridge loan. Quietly. Enough to bring the note current and stabilize the situation until Preston's bank matter is resolved." "Preston's bank matter?" "A misunderstanding," Elaine said quickly. I almost admired her loyalty to denial. Graham continued. "Julian has the resources. You have influence over him. Use it." "And why would I do that?" My father stared at me as if the answer were obvious. "Because we raised you." There it was, the oldest invoice. Elaine reached for my hand. I moved mine before she could touch me. Pain flashed across her face, but it was not real pain. It was offended ownership. "Vivian," she whispered, "we are your parents." I looked at them for a long moment. Then I reached into my bag and removed an envelope. "This may help clarify things." Graham frowned. Elaine watched the envelope like it was a snake. I slid it across the table. Inside were copies of Meridian Ledger's corporate documents, the mortgage note assignment, and a recent company valuation summary. Nothing confidential, nothing inappropriate, just enough truth to make denial difficult. Graham opened it first, impatiently. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. Elaine leaned toward him. "What is it?" He did not answer. I said, "You're asking me to beg my husband for money because you still think he's the powerful one." Graham looked up slowly. "He isn't," I said. "I am." Elaine's lips parted. "I am the founder and CEO of Meridian Ledger." The cafe did not go silent. That only happens in movies. Forks still touched plates. A milk steamer hissed behind the counter. Someone laughed near the window. Life continued around us, indifferent to the fact that my parents' favorite lie had just died at table 12. Graham recovered first by refusing reality. That's absurd. No. You expect us to believe you built Meridian Ledger? I don't expect anything from you. Elaine picked up one of the documents with trembling fingers. But Meridian Ledger is worth approximately $240 million, depending on which valuation model you prefer. My mother stared at me. For the first time in my life, she looked at me like I was visible, not loved, not understood. Visible. It made me sadder than I expected. Graham's face shifted through disbelief, calculation, humiliation, and rage. Calculation lingered longest. That told me everything. You hid this from us, he said. Yes. How dare you? I laughed softly. I could not help it. His voice rose. You let your mother and me believe you were struggling. No, I said. You chose to believe I was failing because it made you feel better. Elaine whispered, We are your family. And that is exactly why I hid it. Her eyes filled again. This time, maybe the tears were real. Not because she had hurt me, because she had lost access to something valuable. I continued, Meridian Ledger is auditing Crestmont's compliance issues. Preston's division is under review. Meridian Ledger's investment arm now owns your mortgage note. You are 5 months delinquent. The notice you received is valid. You have the legally required period to resolve the default or vacate according to process. Graham gripped the papers. You vindictive little... Careful, I said. He stopped, not because he respected me, but because he remembered we were in public. Elaine did not stop. The mask broke so suddenly that even I was surprised. You selfish, cruel girl, she hissed. After everything we gave you, you sit here enjoying this? No. You always hated Madison. You always wanted to punish us for loving her. I looked at her. You didn't love her. You used her to feel successful. There's a difference. Elaine's face twisted. Then she picked up her iced coffee and threw it at me. The drink hit my shoulder and chest, cold soaking through my blouse. Ice scattered across the table. A woman nearby gasped. A waiter froze mid-step. Graham half stood, horrified less by the attack than by the witnesses. Elaine breathed hard, her hand still raised, empty cup trembling in her fingers. For a second, I felt 11 years old. Then I looked up at the black dome security camera above the cafe entrance, and I smiled. Thank you, I said. Elaine blinked. My attorney was concerned about proving ongoing harassment during the eviction, I continued, wiping coffee from my sleeve with a napkin. You just solved that. Graham grabbed Elaine's arm. We're leaving! She seemed to realize then what she had done. Her eyes darted around the room. People were staring openly now, not with admiration, not with envy, with judgment. My mother had spent her life controlling rooms. This one had turned on her in under 10 seconds. Graham dragged her toward the exit while she whispered, Let go of me, through clenched teeth. At the door, he looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his expression I had never seen before. Fear, not guilt, not remorse. Fear of what I could do now that I no longer needed his permission. I stayed at the table until they were outside. Through the window, I watched Graham approach the valet stand. The attendant handed him a small payment device. Graham pulled out a black card and inserted it. Declined. He frowned and tried again. Declined. Elaine stood beside him, arms crossed tightly, coffee cup gone, pearls still perfect against her throat. Graham tried another card. Declined. Then another. Declined. The valet looked uncomfortable. My father's face turned a deep, ugly red. Finally, he reached into his wallet and paid with a crumpled cash bill, the kind of small humiliation he would have mocked in another man. I watched from inside the cafe, my blouse wet, my phone still recording, and felt no joy. That surprised me. I thought the first visible crack in their image would satisfy me. I thought watching Graham Mercer fumble with declined cards outside a Beverly Hills cafe would feel like justice. Instead, it felt like confirmation. Cold, heavy, final. That was the moment I realized they had spent my entire life pretending to be above me while standing on a floor made of debt. Nora arrived 7 minutes later with a coat, a replacement blouse, and the controlled fury of a woman who had already heard everything. She looked at the coffee stains. "Tell me you got that recorded." I handed her the phone. "Audio and cameras." Nora's mouth curved. "I love when terrible people are stupid in high definition." I stood and looked once more through the window. My parents' car pulled away from the curb. Elaine stared straight ahead. Graham gripped the wheel with both hands. For years, they had treated me like the family liability. Now I owned theirs. And the worst part, for them, was that I had not broken a single rule to get it. Madison posted the second video the next morning. By then, the first fundraiser had already crossed $58,000, and strangers online had begun calling me a monster with the kind of confidence people get when they have been handed a villain and told they are righteous for hating her. I did not read every comment. I was not that self-destructive. But Nora flagged the ones that mattered legally, especially the ones Madison liked, replied to, or encouraged. The second video was worse. Not because it was more convincing. It was not. It was worse because it proved Madison had discovered a new level of shamelessness and decided there was still money in it. The thumbnails showed her from the shoulders up, wrapped in a white towel, face pale, eyes red, mouth trembling. The lighting was harsh and bluish, clearly meant to mimic a hospital room. A faint beeping sound played in the background, uneven and too clean, like something pulled from a free audio library. The caption read, "Emergency update. Please pray for my baby." Nora and I watched it in my office with Alina Park on video call and Julian standing silently near the window. Madison inhaled shakily on screen. "I promised myself I wouldn't cry," she whispered, already pretending to cry. "But after everything Vivian has done, after the threats and the stress and the legal intimidation, I started having complications. I don't want to share too much because this is private, but the doctors are worried." The doctors. She did not name a hospital. She did not name a specialist. She did not say how far along she was. She did not explain the complications. She simply placed a trembling hand beneath the towel and lowered her eyes. "My husband's career is being destroyed by powerful people," she continued. "My parents might lose their home because Vivian wants revenge. And now my baby is suffering because of it." Julian turned away from the screen. Nora paused the video. "I'm sorry, I need 10 seconds to hate her." Alina's voice came through the speaker. "Take 5. We bill by the 10th of an hour." I would have laughed if my stomach had not been so tight. Nora zoomed in on the background. "That is not a hospital." "No," I said. The wall behind Madison was beige tile with a decorative border. I had seen that tile before in her social media posts. Her primary bathroom. In the reflection of a chrome towel hook, there was a shelf of luxury skincare products, including one brand she had unboxed 2 weeks earlier. Near the bottom of the frame, beneath the towel, a strip of beige compression fabric was visible for half a second when she shifted. Post-surgical compression garment, not maternity support. Nora took screenshots. No hospital bracelet, No IV mark, no bed rail, no medical equipment, fake monitor, sound, bathroom echo. Alina said, "Preserve the video immediately. Full capture, metadata, comments, donation link, any follow-up statements." "Already doing it," Nora said. Madison continued in the video, voice breaking on cue. "We opened a new emergency medical fund because we don't know what insurance will cover, and Preston's accounts are temporarily frozen because of Vivian's attacks. I hate asking for help, but I have to protect my child." I stared at my sister's face. She hated asking for help the way arsonists hate matches. The new fundraiser link appeared on screen. Emergency medical support for high-risk pregnancy. Within 20 minutes, donations began pouring in. By 11:15, Elaine saw the video. I know because Nora had lawful monitoring on public posts and because my parents' bank activity, relevant to the mortgage default, was now under legal review through proper channels. Everything had a boundary. Everything had a documented reason. That mattered to me more than anger did. Elaine called Madison first. Madison did not answer. Of course she did not. A good performance needs distance. Then Elaine called Preston. No answer. Then she called Graham, though he was likely in the same house. Panic makes people forget doors exist. By noon, my parents had sent Madison $14,300, their last meaningful cash reserve. Nora brought me the update with unusual hesitation. "It came from Graham and Elaine's joint account," she said. "After the transfer, they're nearly empty." I looked at the number on the page. $14,300. It was not even that much money compared to everything else happening. Not compared to Preston's fraud, not compared to my parents' mortgage, not compared to Meridian Ledger's contracts or the millions moving through Crestmont's false vendors. But it hurt more than some of the larger numbers. Because when I was 26, sleeping on an office floor during Meridian's first brutal year, I had asked my mother for $300. Not for shopping, not for a vacation, not for status, rent. I had miscalculated a client payment delay and was $300 short. I remember the shame of that call so clearly I can still feel the phone heating against my ear. Elaine had sighed and said, "Vivian, at some point you have to stop expecting rescue." Then she had told me Madison needed emotional support because an influencer brunch had gone badly. $300 was too much for me. $14,300 left their account in under 5 minutes for Madison's fake crisis. I closed the folder. Nora's voice softened. "Vivian," I shook my head once. "They didn't give me $300 when I was sleeping on an office floor. But they gave Madison their last $14,300 for a fake emergency in under 5 minutes." No one said anything. There are truths you cannot comfort. You can only let them finish cutting. By mid-afternoon, Silas Reed arrived at Meridian Ledger with 2 dossiers. Silas was a former federal financial investigator, the kind of man who looked like he had spent 20 years listening to liars and had permanently lost interest in being impressed. He was compact, gray-haired, precise, and allergic to drama. I liked him immediately the first time Alina introduced us because he did not ask emotional questions. He asked useful ones. He placed the dossiers on my conference table. "One for Preston Vale," he said. "One for Madison Mercer Vale." Alina joined us in person. Nora sat beside me with her laptop open. Julian stayed near the wall, present but not interfering. That was his gift to me. Support without possession. Silas opened the first dossier. "Preston's situation is worse than preliminary review suggested," he said. He spread the documents across the table. Transaction maps, vendor lists, authorization chains, shell company registrations, wire records, offshore references, email excerpts lawfully preserved through Crestmont's compliance process. Over the past 18 months, approximately $4.7 million moved out of client trust accounts through false vendor invoices. Nora inhaled quietly. Silas continued. The vendors appear legitimate at first glance. Consulting services, risk analysis, software implementation, document review. But the entities are shells. 2 domestic LLCs, 1 Delaware registration with a nominee manager, and a foreign routing structure connected to a Cayman account. And Preston? I asked. Approval authority on the majority. Direct login activity on several manual overrides. Internal messages showing he pressured junior staff to clear invoices quickly. We also have transfers from one shell path into accounts tied to Madison's personal spending. Alina leaned forward. How direct is the link? Enough to interest federal authorities, not enough that I'd call it finished. But Meridian's compliance team already submitted the formal suspicious activity package through proper channels. Federal investigators are aware. I looked down at one transaction map. Money moved from client trust to false vendor, from vendor to shell, from shell to offshore, from offshore to domestic account, from domestic account to Madison's luxury purchases. Bags, jewelry, cosmetic clinics, event deposits, influencer management services, a lifestyle built with stolen money. Preston had not been careless because he was stupid. He had been careless because entitlement makes people believe consequences are for everyone else. Silas tapped another page. There's also evidence he tried to delete files after receiving the audit notice. Nora smiled without warmth. Recorded? Every attempt. Beautiful. Alina gave her a look. Nora lifted both hands. Legally beautiful? Silas closed the first dossier and opened the second. Madison's pregnancy claim, he said. I want to be precise. We did not access private medical records. We did not contact providers under false pretenses. We did not obtain protected health information. Good, I said. What we have is public statements, financial records tied to fraud proceeds, vendor records, surveillance from public or consented areas, and inconsistencies in her own posts. He laid out the timeline. 3 months earlier, Madison had begun hinting on Elaine that she and Preston were manifesting a new chapter. 6 weeks later, she purchased a fake ultrasound image from an online novelty vendor using a secondary email address tied to one of her brand accounts. Then she booked a cosmetic procedure under the name Maddie Lane at a private clinic in Orange County, not obstetrics, cosmetic surgery. Silas pointed to payment records. $38,000 cash equivalent, routed through funds connected to Preston's shell structure. Procedure package included abdominoplasty, revision, and aggressive liposuction. She appears to have had complications afterward. Infection? Swelling? Delayed healing? Nora looked at the paused image from Madison's fake hospital video. That explains the wince. Yes, Silas said. And the compression garment. He slid several photographs across the table. Madison entering the clinic through a side entrance. Madison leaving days later in oversized clothing, walking carefully, assisted by a private nurse. Madison at a pharmacy pickup. Madison later posing online with one hand over her stomach, letting people assume pregnancy while hiding post-operative swelling. The evidence did not feel satisfying. It felt diseased. Because Madison had not just lied casually. She had built a whole emotional economy around a child who did not exist. She had taken people's sympathy, their fear, their donations, and her own parents' last cash reserve, and poured it all into a performance designed to keep herself adored. Silas continued, the fundraiser statements create significant exposure. She repeatedly claimed pregnancy, medical complications, and financial emergency. Funds were solicited for specific medical needs that do not appear to exist. Some donations were routed almost immediately to personal spending. Alina's pen moved quickly. Platform fraud, wire implications depending on processing, state charity solicitation issues possibly, consumer protection angles. Nora muttered, influencer tiers as a felony pipeline. I looked at the fake ultrasound vendor receipt. Madison had chosen an image labeled 8 weeks. In her dinner performance, she had avoided saying how far along she was. In her first video, she had implied stress could harm the baby. In the second, she had suggested doctors were worried. Every vague sentence was designed to invite assumptions without anchoring her to medical facts. It was almost clever. Almost. Silas looked at me. There's one more thing. I waited. Graham and Elaine appear to have believed her, at least initially. No evidence they helped create the fake pregnancy claim before the public posts. That should have mattered. It did in a legal sense, but emotionally, it cut in a different direction. My parents did not need evidence to believe Madison. They never had. She could wrap herself in a towel, stand in her own bathroom, play fake hospital sounds, and they would empty their account for her within minutes. But I could have walked into their house carrying proof, blood, and bruises, and they still would have asked what I did to deserve it. I stood abruptly. The room went still. I need a minute. Julian moved first, not toward me, just away from the wall. A question in his eyes. I nodded slightly, letting him know I was not leaving because of him. I walked into the private corridor outside the conference room and closed the door behind me. For the first time since the dinner, my composure cracked, not loudly. I did not sob. I did not collapse. I simply leaned against the wall, pressed both hands over my mouth, and let the truth move through me. They had always been capable of immediate love. They had always been capable of blind faith. They had always been capable of sacrifice. Just not for me. That realization was sharper than revenge. It reached past anger into the oldest room inside me, the one where a little girl still held up report cards and waited to be chosen. The door opened softly. Julian stepped out. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew better. Instead, he stood beside me, shoulder near mine, close enough to steady but not trap. After a while, I said, "They sent her everything." "I know. I asked my mother for $300 once." His face changed. "You never told me that." "I was ashamed. You were surviving." I swallowed hard. I think some part of me still believed there was a version of pain they would recognize if it was serious enough, but it was never about seriousness. It was about me. Julian's hand found mine. This time I held on first. When I returned to the conference room, everyone pretended not to notice my eyes were brighter. I appreciated that. Lena asked, "How do you want to proceed?" I looked at the dossiers. Preston's fraud, Madison's fake pregnancy, my parents' default, the cabin documents, the fundraiser, the public lies, pieces of one ugly machine. I could have released a statement that day. I could have sued immediately. I could have gone online with the evidence and let the internet devour Madison in the same arena where she had tried to destroy me. But my family did not worship the internet. They used it? Yes. Madison fed on it. But Graham and Elaine worshipped society. Rooms, galas, donor lists, names whispered over champagne. Preston worshipped institutional respect, the polished banking world where men in expensive suits called theft irregularities until handcuffs appeared. If the truth came out online, they would call it drama. If it came out in the right room, in front of the right people, with documents clean enough to survive court, and cameras unavoidable enough to survive denial, they would call it ruin. Nora seemed to read my expression. "You're thinking something," she said. "The Hope Harbor Charity Gala is next week." Alina looked up. "The neonatal emergency care fundraiser?" "Yes." Madison and Elaine had been bragging about attending for months. Madison had posted about finding the perfect gown for her mama era. Elaine had hinted that the gala committee admired her family's dedication to children's health. Graham needed the room because he needed investors, lenders, anyone who might help him keep the mansion facade alive. Preston needed wealthy contacts for a desperate bridge loan or a way to soften the collapse at Crestmont. And the theme of the gala made Madison's lie unforgivable. Hope Harbor raised money for neonatal emergency care and medical support for vulnerable mothers. Real mothers, real babies, real crises. Families sitting beside incubators praying for children Madison had turned into a prop. I said, "They care about that room more than they care about the truth." Silas studied me. "Public exposure creates risk." "I know," Alina added. "We would need to control what is shown. Redact financial records, avoid protected information. Stick to public statements, lawful documents, and evidence tied to fraud." "Then that's what we do." Nora's eyes sharpened. "You want to expose them at the gala?" "No," I said. Everyone looked at me. "I want to give Madison one final chance not to lie in that room." Alina watched me carefully. "And if she takes the microphone anyway?" I looked down at the fake ultrasound receipt, then at Preston's transaction map, then at the foreclosure notice bearing my company's name. Then we tell them the whole story. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Silas closed the dossiers with a soft, final sound. "People think revenge begins when you strike. They are wrong. Sometimes revenge begins when you stop interrupting people on their way to consequences." My family had chosen the stage. They had chosen the lies. They had chosen the audience. All I had to do was let them walk into the room. The Hope Harbor Charity Gala was exactly the kind of event my family worshipped. Not because of the cause. The cause was real, important, painfully real. Hope Harbor raised money for neonatal emergency care and medical support for vulnerable mothers. The kind of work that existed in hospital rooms at 3 in the morning, where parents whispered prayers over incubators and doctors fought for children too small to fight for themselves. But my family did not worship causes. They worshipped rooms. Rooms with chandeliers. Rooms with photographers. Rooms where donors wore diamonds and bankers smiled over champagne. Rooms where Elaine could pretend compassion was the same thing as status. Where Graham could shake hands with men who might still lend him money. Where Madison could pose as a fragile, expecting mother and collect sympathy like currency. Where Preston could look for one last bridge before the ground disappeared beneath him. The gala was held at a historic hotel in Beverly Hills, all creamstone, gold light, and imported flowers. A step-and-repeat banner stood near the entrance, covered in sponsor logos and the words, "Hope Harbor, every mother, every child." Cameras flashed while guests drifted in wearing gowns that cost more than some families' medical bills. A string quartet played near the foyer. Waiters moved through the crowd with silver trays of champagne and tiny food no one ate because everyone wanted to look effortless in photographs. My family arrived at 7:12. I watched them enter from a private side corridor with Nora, Julian, Alina Park, and Silas Reed nearby. We were not hiding, not exactly. We were waiting. Graham stepped out of a black town car first, tugging at his tuxedo jacket like the fabric had tightened around his panic. He looked older than he had a week earlier. Fear ages people faster than time. His smile appeared only when cameras turned toward him, then vanished as soon as they moved away. His eyes scanned the room before he even reached the check-in table. Investors, lenders, social allies, anyone who might still believe the Mercer name meant stability. Elaine followed, wearing an old designer gown she had probably called vintage, because desperate people rename decline. The dress was beautiful, but I recognized it from a gala almost 8 years earlier. Elaine would have hated repeating a gown in public. That alone told me how little money remained. Still, her posture was perfect. Her pearls were perfect. Her smile was perfect. My mother would have walked into bankruptcy with lipstick freshly applied and called it grace. Preston came next, pale under his tan, one hand in his pocket, the other wrapped too tightly around his phone. He checked the screen 3 times in under a minute. His tuxedo fit well, but nothing else about him did. He looked like a man standing in a room full of exits and realizing none of them belonged to him. Then Madison stepped into the lights. She wore a loose black gown with long sleeves and a high waist, elegant from a distance, strategic up close. It hid the swelling around her abdomen while allowing her to cradle herself in photographs. Her makeup was softer than usual, her hair pinned back, her eyes wide and damp. She looked fragile, radiant, tragically brave. A performance polished to glass. Photographers called her name because the internet had made her useful. Madison, over here! How are you feeling tonight? Any update on the baby? She placed one hand over her stomach and smiled with trembling courage. We're taking it one day at a time. Nora made a sound low in her throat. Alina murmured, Remember, we wait. I nodded. I had promised myself one thing. If Madison came to the gala, smiled for photos, collected attention, and left quietly, I would not expose her that night. Legal consequences would still come. The investigations would continue. The fundraiser records would still be turned over. Preston's fraud would not disappear. My parents' foreclosure would proceed. But I would not turn a charity event for sick babies into a family battlefield unless Madison forced the truth into the room herself. I wanted that to be true. A part of me wanted her to stop. That is the humiliating thing about hope. Even after people prove themselves again and again, some small wounded part of you waits for them to choose differently at the last possible second. Julian stood beside me, his hand brushing mine. You okay? No. He nodded once. Good answer. Across the ballroom, Madison leaned into Elaine while Graham greeted a donor with both hands. Preston disappeared toward the bar before the first speech even began. The family looked united from a distance. Up close, they were coming apart. We entered through the main ballroom doors at 7:30. I wore an emerald silk gown Julian had chosen because he said the color made me look like I knew secrets. My hair was swept back, my jewelry was minimal. I had spent years avoiding my family's rooms, avoiding their social circles, avoiding the kind of visibility they craved. But that night, when I stepped beneath the chandeliers, I did not feel like an intruder. I felt like the person who had paid for part of the room. Because I had. Meridian Ledger had made a major contribution to Hope Harbor 3 months earlier, long before Madison built her fake pregnancy into a public brand. The donation had been quiet. No press release, no gala stunt, just money sent where it could help. But quiet donations are still known by the people who run organizations. The gala chair saw me first, her face lit with real warmth as she crossed the room. Vivian, you came. I hugged her lightly. Of course. We are so grateful for Meridian's support. Truly. The neonatal transport program is moving ahead because of you. Because of the whole donor group, I said. She smiled. Generous and modest, dangerous combination. Nearby, a city official turned, recognized me, and came over to thank me for Meridian's contribution to a public-private health data initiative. Then a banker I had negotiated with the previous year approached to introduce me to his wife. Then two journalists glanced from their phones to my face and began whispering. The ripple moved faster than I expected. Vivian Mercer was not a plus one. Vivian Mercer was not Julian Cross's quiet wife. Vivian Mercer was the founder and CEO of a company that half the financial people in that ballroom either used, wanted, feared, or had heard about from someone who did. And my family saw it happen. Madison noticed first. Her expression shifted while she watched the gala chair hold my hands warmly. Confusion, irritation, disbelief. Then Elaine saw the city official greet me. Her smile froze on her face. Graham turned when a banker said my name too loudly. Preston heard Meridian Ledger and nearly dropped his glass. For one beautiful second, none of them could rearrange reality quickly enough. Then Preston moved. He crossed the ballroom toward Julian, not me. Because even now, even with evidence blooming around him, he still assumed the man must be the gate. I watched him corner Julian near the bar. Julian did not look surprised. He accepted a glass of water from the bartender and waited. Preston leaned in. "We need to talk." Julian looked at him. "Do we?" "I think there may have been a misunderstanding between our families. That word is doing a lot of work lately." Preston's jaw tightened. "Listen, Crestmont is dealing with temporary review noise. Nothing that can't be managed. But liquidity perception matters. If the wrong people panic, good institutions suffer. How tragic for the institution." Preston lowered his voice. "I need $3 million. Julian's expression did not change. "A bridge loan," Preston said quickly. "Short term, quiet, secured. You'll make money on it." Julian looked past him toward the ballroom. "Secured by what?" Preston swallowed. "Future distributions, certain assets." "You mean stolen client funds?" Preston's face went gray. Julian set his water down. "An accounting issue is a misplaced decimal. Creating fake vendors to steal millions from client trusts is a felony." Preston stepped closer, panic sharpening into threat. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough to suggest you stop drinking." Preston looked toward me then. Finally, his eyes widened as if the pieces were moving but still refusing to lock. Julian followed his gaze. "You should have paid more attention at dinner. Vivian usually tells people who they are before the evidence does." Madison's jealousy exploded less elegantly. She had spent the first half hour trying to understand why people kept greeting me, why donors knew me, why journalists watched me, why her mother suddenly looked frightened. Madison's entire life had been built on comparison, and in that room, the comparison had turned against her publicly. Then the gala host took the stage. The room quieted, glasses lowered. The host, a warm woman with silver hair and a voice trained by years of fundraising, began speaking about the families Hope Harbor served. She talked about premature infants transferred between hospitals at midnight, mothers without insurance facing impossible choices, parents who slept in chairs beside tiny machines, doctors who needed equipment that cost more than most people could imagine. Real pain entered the room. For once, the crowd stopped performing. Madison could not stand it. I saw the moment she made the decision. Her shoulders straightened, her hand pressed against her stomach. Her face arranged itself into wounded bravery. Elaine caught her wrist and whispered something, but Madison pulled away. She walked toward the stage. My heartbeat slowed. Not sped up, slowed. There are moments when you realize the future has narrowed to one door, and everyone is walking toward it. Madison stepped onto the stage beside the host and reached for the microphone. The host looked startled. Madison? Madison gave her a trembling smile. I'm so sorry. I need to say something. For every mother here who has been silenced. A murmur moved through the crowd. Alina closed her eyes for half a second. Nora whispered, There it is. Madison turned toward the ballroom, her hand over her stomach. I didn't plan to do this tonight, but standing here, listening to these stories, I realized I can't keep pretending everything is okay. My family is in crisis. My unborn child has been put at risk by someone in this room. Guests began looking around. Madison's eyes found me. My sister, Vivian Mercer, has used money and intimidation to abuse my family. She is trying to evict my elderly parents. She is destroying my husband's career. She has caused me medical complications during my pregnancy, and now she is standing here pretending to be generous while privately ruining lives. The room went silent, not quiet, silent. Julian moved one step, but I touched his arm. No, I said softly. Mine. I walked toward the stage. Every eye followed me. When I reached Madison, she looked triumphant. There were tears on her cheeks now. Real or fake, I no longer cared. I leaned close enough that only she could hear me. Do not do this, I said. Once I answer you publicly, I will answer with everything. Madison's smile trembled, but she lifted the microphone again. I'm going to expose you. I looked at my sister, at the child she had once been, at the woman she had chosen to become, at every lie my parents had rewarded until lying became the only language she spoke fluently. Then, I said, taking the second microphone from the stunned host, we'll tell them the whole story. I turned to the audience. I apologize to everyone here, I began. This event is meant to support real mothers, real children, and real medical crises. My sister has chosen to make private family matters public in this room, at this event, in front of this cause. I gave her the opportunity to stop. She refused. Madison laughed sharply. You're insane. I looked toward the AV team at the side of the room. Please connect my tablet. The gala chair, pale but composed, nodded once. She knew enough, not everything, but enough to trust me. The screen lowered behind us. The first slide appeared. Meridian Ledger Legal Department. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. A wave moved through the room. Graham stood so fast his chair tipped backward. I kept my voice steady. My parents, Graham and Elaine Mercer, have not paid the mortgage on their Calabasas mansion in 5 months. They took a second mortgage to help fund Madison's wedding. They took additional debt to maintain appearances, including club expenses and lifestyle costs. Their lender sold the distressed note. Meridian Ledger's investment arm lawfully purchased it. Elaine's face collapsed. This is not abuse, I said. This is debt. Documented, noticed, and handled through legal process. Graham shouted, Turn that off! No one moved. I clicked to the next slide. Account summary, redacted, transfer record. My parents recently sent their last meaningful cash reserve, $14,300, to Madison's emergency medical fundraiser. Madison grabbed my arm. Stop. I pulled away. No. The next slide appeared. Screenshots of Madison's public fundraiser, her caption about pregnancy complications, her bathroom video, the reflection of skincare products, the missing hospital bracelet, the fake monitor audio file match, the compression garment visible beneath the towel. Madison's face went white. I said, Madison is not pregnant. She never was. The ballroom erupted. Voices, gasps. A woman near the front whispered, Oh my God. Someone else said, At this gala? With disgust sharp enough to cut glass. Madison lunged for the microphone. She's lying. I clicked again. Fake ultrasound vendor receipt, public social media timeline. Cosmetic clinic entrance images from public surveillance. Payment trail connected to funds under investigation. Redactions protected what needed protecting. The truth remained intact. The crisis Madison described was not a miscarriage scare, I said. It was not a high-risk pregnancy complication. It was a post-operative complication from a cosmetic procedure paid for with money tied to fraudulent transfers. The hostility in the room changed temperature. At first, people had been shocked. Now they were offended. There is a special kind of disgust reserved for people who exploit compassion meant for the vulnerable. Madison had walked into a room built for premature babies and desperate mothers and tried to turn that pain into cover for herself. The room felt it. Elaine whispered, "Madison?" Madison turned toward our mother with rage, not shame. "Don't look at me like that." I clicked to the third evidence set. Preston Vale, redacted forensic review summary. Preston backed away from the bar. I saw him look toward the exits. Silas saw it too. So did the two federal agents waiting near the service entrance. I said, Preston Vale used his position at Crestmont Private Bank to approve false vendor invoices and move approximately $4.7 million from client trust accounts through shell entities and offshore routing structures. Preston shouted, "That is confidential banking information." "It is redacted forensic evidence connected to suspected crimes," I said, "and the full package has been provided to the proper authorities." The screen displayed a simplified transaction map, trust accounts, fake vendors, shell companies, offshore account, domestic spending, Madison's purchases. Some of those funds went directly into Madison's lifestyle, I continued. Luxury goods, brand expenses, cosmetic procedures, fundraiser fraud did the rest. Madison screamed, "She made all of this with computers? She's jealous. She has always been jealous." But the room did not believe her anymore. Business leaders recognized the audit formatting. Bankers recognized the transaction patterns. Donors recognized the fundraiser fraud. Mothers in the room recognized something even simpler. Madison had pretended to carry a child to steal sympathy from people who came to help children survive. Then the ballroom doors opened. Two federal agents entered first, followed by a local officer. Preston turned to run, but there was nowhere dignified to go in a tuxedo with half the city watching. The lead agent approached him. "Preston Vale?" Preston's mouth opened. No sound came out. "You are under arrest on charges including wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit money laundering." The sound of handcuffs closing is smaller than people imagine. But in that ballroom, it sounded final. Madison screamed and rushed toward him. "No, you can't do this. He didn't do anything." A local officer stepped between them. "Ma'am, step back." "He's my husband." "Step back." Preston did not look at her. That was what I noticed. As they turned him toward the exit, he looked at me, not with guilt, with hatred, as if I had stolen something from him by refusing to let him keep what he stole from others. Graham collapsed near the ice sculpture. It was not dramatic at first. His knees buckled, one hand reached for a chair that was not close enough, and then he went down hard. Elaine cried out and rushed to him, but no one from their social circle moved immediately. That was the truth my father had never understood about status. It is loyal only while you are useful. The moment ruin becomes contagious, polite people step back. And they did. They stepped back from Elaine's gown, from Graham's fallen body, from Madison's sobbing, from the Mercer name. A medic came forward from the event staff. Graham was conscious, breathing fast, clutching his chest but not dying, just panicking. His son-in-law was in federal custody. His mansion was in foreclosure. His money was gone. His reputation had died in the room he needed most. Elaine rose from beside him and turned to me. For the first time in my life, my mother did not look polished. Her hair had loosened, her lipstick had smudged, one pearl earring hung crooked. She walked toward the stage like a woman crossing broken glass. Then she fell to her knees in front of me. The room went still again. "Vivian," she sobbed. "Please." I looked down at her. How many times had I imagined this? Not exactly this, not my mother kneeling at a gala, but some version of her finally seeing me, finally regretting it, finally understanding that the daughter she dismissed had been real all along. "Please," Elaine said again, "save the house. Help your father, hire Preston a lawyer. Madison made mistakes, but she is your sister. We can fix this privately. You can pay back the money. You can stop the foreclosure. Please, sweetheart." Sweetheart. There it was again. But it did not reach me this time. Elaine grabbed at my hand. "You were the successful one. You were the brilliant daughter. We were wrong. We were wrong, Vivian. I'm saying it now. Isn't that what you wanted?" For 34 years, yes. I had wanted those words like water. You were the successful one. You were the brilliant daughter. We were wrong. There it was. The apology I had wanted since I was 13. But it did not feel like healing. It felt like a transaction. She had not found love. She had found leverage. I gently removed my hand from hers. "You do not love me," I said. "You love access to me." Elaine flinched as if I had slapped her. I reached into the folder Nora handed me and removed the original relinquishment document from the dinner. The Aspen cabin. Evelyn's cabin. The last place I had felt chosen. Elaine saw it, and hope flickered in her wet eyes. I signed it. For 1 second, her face transformed with relief. Then I looked at Graham, still breathing hard beside the ice sculpture, and at Madison, mascara streaked and furious, and at the guests watching the final act of a family myth collapse. "You wanted me to sign this because you thought it would make me smaller," I said. Elaine frowned. "Vivian." The Aspen cabin has a $230,000 federal tax lien attached to it, plus years of unpaid penalties tied to mismanaged estate obligations. I discovered it during due diligence after you tried to force me out. Graham's head lifted. Madison whispered, "What?" "By demanding full control and accepting transfer of my interest, you inherit the liability without me. My attorneys have reviewed it. Once this is filed, I am no longer responsible." Elaine's mouth opened. No words came. I placed the signed document in her hands. "All it did," I said, "was make your debt bigger." That was the final blow. Not because of the money. My family had lost more that week than the tax lien. It was the humiliation of realizing the trap they built for me had closed around them instead. For once, they had gotten exactly what they demanded. I looked at Madison one last time. She stared back with hatred so pure it almost looked like grief. Then I turned to Julian. He held out his hand. I took it. We walked down from the stage together. No speech, no victory lap, no final insult. The room parted quietly as we passed. Some people looked at me with pity, some with admiration, some with fear. I wanted none of it. Near the exit, the gala chair touched my arm and whispered, "Thank you for the donation, and I'm sorry." I nodded. "Make sure the families get what they need." "They will." Behind me, Madison was still screaming. Elaine was crying over the signed papers. Graham sat surrounded by medics, staring into nothing. Preston was gone, taken through the hotel doors in handcuffs, while photographers captured the end of his borrowed importance. Julian and I stepped into the night air. The city was cool and bright around us. For years, I had imagined revenge as fire, loud, red, consuming everything. But walking away from that ballroom, I understood something else. Fire still needs the thing it burns. I did not want to burn with them. I wanted to leave them behind. 3 weeks after the Hope Harbor Gala, Preston Vale was denied bail. I did not attend the hearing. I did not need to sit in a courtroom and watch him realize expensive suits did not impress federal judges. Alina sent me the summary. Flight risk, offshore accounts, large-scale financial fraud, strong forensic evidence, attempted deletion of records after audit notice. The prosecution argued that a man who had moved millions through shell companies already understood how to disappear. The judge agreed. Preston was remanded to federal detention pending trial. Madison posted nothing that day. That was how I knew it was bad. For years, my sister had treated silence like death. Every outfit, meal, tear, and imagined injury had to be documented for an audience. But after Preston was taken into custody, the cameras turned from flattering to hungry. Gala footage spread everywhere, not just gossip pages. Local news, financial blogs, influencer watchdog accounts, banking industry newsletters. Hope Harbor donors wanted answers. Crestmont wanted distance. Former followers wanted refunds. The internet, which Madison had used like a weapon, turned in her hands. Her fundraiser was frozen first. Then the platform announced donor refunds pending investigation. Then 3 brands ended partnerships in language so polished it almost sounded kind. They cited values, authenticity, and community trust, which was corporate code for "you are now dangerous to stand beside." Her follower count dropped in chunks. Every time she disabled comments, someone reposted the gala clip. Every time she claimed she was misunderstood, someone posted the fake ultrasound receipt. Every time she hinted at trauma, real mothers who had donated to Hope Harbor asked her where their sympathy had gone. Madison called me 46 times in 1 week. I answered none of them. My parents lost the mansion 6 weeks after the gala. The foreclosure process moved with the slow, grinding certainty of law. Notices were delivered, deadlines passed. Graham tried to negotiate without money. Elaine tried to appeal to family through attorneys. Madison tried to claim emotional damages online and was advised by her own lawyer to stop speaking. Nothing changed the numbers. Debt does not care how beloved you were at country club brunches. On the morning deputies arrived, I was in my office reviewing a Meridian Ledger expansion proposal when Nora came in and closed the door behind her. "It's happening," she said. I knew what she meant. For a moment, I thought I would feel something dramatic. Satisfaction, grief, triumph, regret. Instead, I felt the quiet awareness of an ending that had been written long before I bought the note. My parents had lost the house years ago. The deputies were only making it visible. I did not watch live footage. I refused to be that person. But later, Alina sent a legal update with photographs attached for documentation. I opened them alone. Sheriff's deputies stood outside the Calabasas mansion under the same arched doorway where my mother had once examined my dress and called it comfortable. Boxes lined the driveway. Not elegant luggage, not curated storage bins, cardboard boxes, hastily taped. A neighbor stood across the street in workout clothes, pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. Another person filmed from behind a hedge. Their cars were repossessed the same week. Graham and Elaine moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment near a noisy freeway in the valley. I knew because Graham texted me the address with the words, "This is what you have done." what I had done. Not the missed payments, not the second mortgage for Madison's wedding, not the third line of credit for status, not the last $14,300 sent to a fake medical crisis, not decades of choosing appearance over stability. Me. That was the final proof that nothing I did would ever make them honest. A month later, I received a photo from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, thinking it was another threat. But curiosity won. The image showed Elaine sitting on a thrift store couch in a beige apartment, her pearls still around her neck, phone pressed to her ear, face slack with disbelief. According to the message beneath it, she had spent the morning calling old friends from the country club. Most did not answer. 2 had blocked her. 1 sent flowers and no invitation. Graham, meanwhile, spent his days at a folding table covered in IRS notices about the Aspen cabin tax lien. That was what he texted me about most. Not remorse, not apology, not even fear for Madison. The lien, the penalties, the unfairness of being responsible for the property he had demanded I surrender. You need to fix this. You knew about the lien. You trapped us. Evelyn would be ashamed of you. That last one almost got a reaction. Almost. But I had learned something by then. People like my father use the dead when the living stop obeying. Evelyn had loved me. She had wanted my life to belong to me. I would not let Graham borrow her voice just because he had lost the power of his own. Madison's consequences came differently. She did not collapse all at once. She unraveled in public, thread by thread. First, the brand deals disappeared. Then her management agency dropped her. Then the investigation into fundraiser fraud became impossible to ignore. Then Preston's lawyers began suggesting, carefully and through leaks, that Madison had pressured him financially. Madison responded by posting a crying video accusing everyone of abandoning her. The video got millions of views, but not the kind she wanted. People stitched it with clips from the gala. They zoomed in on her fake hospital video. They compared her pregnancy glow posts with clinic surveillance stills. They found old clips where she mocked women who worked retail, women who wore uniforms, women who could not afford luxury skincare. The internet has a cruel memory when it decides to use it. Eventually, Madison got a job at a discount clothing store. I did not know at first. Elaine texted me, furious, as if employment were a disease Madison had caught from poverty. Your sister is being humiliated. She is standing under fluorescent lights while strangers yell at her over coupons. Are you happy now? I was not happy. That was the thing none of them understood. I had not wanted Madison behind a register as some cartoon punishment. I did not need her crushed under ordinary life. But there was a strange justice in watching someone who had mocked working people finally discover that work was not beneath her. It was simply what people did when stolen money stopped protecting them. A week later, Madison messaged me from a new number. You ruined my life. Then, 2 minutes later, I need help with legal fees. Then, I know you're reading these. Then, you were always jealous because Mom loved me more. Then, please, Vivian, I'm scared. I stared at that last message for a long time. Please, Vivian, I'm scared. There was a time when those words would have moved me instantly, not because Madison deserved rescue, but because fear sounded familiar. I knew what it was to be afraid and alone. I knew what it was to feel the world closing in. The difference was that when I was afraid, Madison laughed. When I was alone, my parents called it character building. When I needed help, my mother told me to stop expecting rescue. I placed the phone face down. The old guilt waited outside the door of my chest. It knocked once, then left. For several months, I kept one old personal phone active. I told myself it was for legal documentation. And that was partly true. Messages mattered. Threats mattered. Demands mattered. But if I'm being honest, another part of me kept it because cutting the last thread felt bigger than I was ready to admit. That phone became a museum of everything my family had ever been. Graham demanded I pay the Aspen lien. Elaine begged for a better apartment. Madison alternated between rage and pleading. Preston sent one message through his attorney requesting that I consider the damage being done to innocent family members. I forwarded that one to Alina, who laughed for the first time in our entire working relationship. Some messages were cruel. Some were pathetic. Some sounded almost loving if you ignored the invoice attached to every sentence. Vivian, we can heal if you stop punishing us. Sweetheart, I miss my daughter. You owe this family more than silence. We made mistakes, but you are taking this too far. Family should forgive. Family should help. Family should not keep score. That last one made me set the phone down and walk away, because families like mine always hated scorekeeping after the bill came due. One evening in late summer, Julian found me sitting on the edge of our bed with the old phone in my hand. The room was gold with sunset. The city outside looked softer than it was. He leaned against the doorway. Bad one? I shook my head. Same one, different words. He came in and sat beside me, not close enough to crowd, close enough to remind me I was not alone. What are you waiting to feel? He asked. That was Julian, gentle enough to ask, honest enough to ask the real question. I looked down at the screen. Graham had sent another message about the lien. Elaine had sent a photo of her apartment kitchen as if I would be moved by laminate counters. Madison had sent a voice memo I refused to play. I think I'm waiting to feel guilty, I said. And I searched myself. There was sadness, old sadness, the kind that belongs not to what happened, but to what never happened. There was grief for the parents I had wanted and never had. There was grief for the sister Madison might have been if our family had not rewarded every cruel instinct until it became her personality. But guilt? No. Not hatred either, not joy, not even anger in the old burning way, just distance. That's how I know I am finally free, I whispered. Their pain no longer feels like my assignment. Julian took my hand. The next weekend, we drove north on the Pacific Coast Highway with no destination except away. The ocean ran beside us, vast and silver blue under the late afternoon sun. Cliffs rose on one side. Water opened on the other. The sky slowly turned gold, then violet at the edges. Julian drove with the windows down and one hand resting near mine. He did not fill the silence. He never treated quiet as something broken. For years, silence in my family had meant danger. Someone was angry. Someone was withholding. Someone was waiting for me to apologize. With Julian, silence meant peace. We stopped at a turnout above the water just as the sun began to sink. Waves folded against the rocks below, white and endless. The air smelled like salt and warm dust. I took the old phone from my bag. Julian saw it and looked at me. What are you doing? I powered it off. For a moment, I held it in my palm. It was such a small thing to have carried so much. My mother's voice, my father's demands, Madison's lies, years of old reflexes compressed into glass and metal. Cleaning house, I said. Then I rolled down the window and threw it into the ocean. It disappeared without drama, no lightning, no music, no cinematic crash. Just a small dark shape swallowed by water, gone before I could change my mind. I expected to feel shocked by what I had done. Instead, I laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly. Just one breath of disbelief and relief. Julian smiled. Better? I watched the waves. Quiet, I said. And it was. For the first time in my life, the silence did not feel like punishment. It felt like a door closing gently behind me. I used to think revenge would feel loud. I thought it would mean screaming the truth across a room until my family finally admitted they had been wrong. I thought it would mean forcing my father to respect me, forcing my mother to love me properly, forcing Madison to understand that I had never been beneath her. But real revenge was not the mansion. It was not the gala. It was not Preston leaving in handcuffs, or Madison losing the audience she lied to, or Graham staring at tax liens on a folding table, or Elaine discovering that social friends disappear when status does. The final revenge was peace. It was realizing I did not need to be loved by people who only valued me when I became useful. It was understanding that an apology offered in exchange for money is not love. It was accepting that some families do not become kinder when you finally prove yourself. They only become more expensive. I had spent my life waiting for the Mercers to open a door for me. Instead, I built my own house. I built my company. I chose my husband. I found loyalty in people who did not require me to shrink before they could stand beside me. I learned that freedom does not always arrive as joy. Sometimes it arrives as the absence of a voice you no longer have to answer. That evening, with the Pacific turning dark beneath the last light, Julian reached for my hand. I took it. And, for once, I did not look back.